right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Wednesday, March 21st meeting of the Tallahassee City Commission. I'd like to welcome you all here this afternoon, and for those who are willing and able, I will invite you to stand for the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Eternal God, today we give thanks for another opportunity to celebrate springtime in Tallahassee. We are grateful for the new blossoms and the radiant beauty they provide throughout our community. We ask that you provide guidance for our leaders as they conduct the business of this great city. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Mr. City Manager, are there any agenda modifications?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 1309 has been added to your agenda. Item 9.01 has been renumbered and moved to Section 10 and is now 10.01.
Awesome. Thank you. Right. I want to invite forward for a few presentations. The first being a proclamation being presented and recognizing the Llewellyn Chain of Arts Festival. And will Kelly Dozier, Vanessa Rowe, and anyone who is here for that presentation, please join me. All right. Happy spring, everybody. It is festival season almost. And hey, David. Y'all. All right. It's my pleasure to make this presentation as we, one, celebrate spring finally being here, and two, prepare for festival season. We have appropriately, I believe, named April festival season for our community. And the proclamation reads, whereas Llewellyn Chain of Parks Art Festival is in its 18th year, it is one of Tallahassee's signature annual events and the Big Bend's premier visual arts festival. And whereas the Chain of Parks Art Festival is established to present an outdoor festival of high-quality original artwork and entertainment for the enjoyment of our Tallahassee area residents and visitors while fostering the careers and financial support of local and regional artists. And whereas the Chain of Parks Art Festival, held annually in April, hosts over 170 professional artists from all over the country and brings between 35,000 and 40,000 visitors to the downtown of Tallahassee's Chain of Parks for a unique, high-quality cultural experience of all ages featuring beautiful art, amazing performances, delicious food, I can attest to all of that, and interactive art experiences. And whereas the two-day festival is an economic stimulus for the community, generating hotel stays, revenue for local artists, visits to local dining and shopping venues, and sales tax generated throughout art sales, resulting in a significant economic impact of $1.4 million from last year's festival alone. And whereas Sunshine Artist Magazine, the leading publication for arts and crafts show exhibitors, promoters, and patrons in the United States, annually publishes the 100 best art and design shows in the country. And whereas the Chain of Parks Art Festival has been ranked in Sunshine Artist Magazine's top 100 fine art shows for 3 years running and is now named the #1, give it up for these folks, #1 fine arts festival in the nation in 2017. What a feat. And whereas the city of Tallahassee congratulates all the volunteers, sponsors, artists, and visitors who have contributed to the success and growth of the festival. Therefore, I, Andrew Gillum, by the authority vested in me as the mayor of the city of Tallahassee, do hereby proclaim the dates of April 21st and 22nd, 2018 to be the weekend of the Chain of Arts Festival, the #1 fine arts festival in the nation. Congratulations. Will you all please give it up for these wonderful volunteers?
Well, we are thrilled to be here. Thank you, Mayor, for the proclamation and commissioners. We appreciate the City of Tallahassee's support. We couldn't do it without you. And everyone here, the whole community comes out and supports us. I see a lot of sponsors. I see Ashley Edwards with Parks and Recs, and they're a great help. So thank you very much. We're very honored to have this and come out to the festival, third weekend in April. See you.
All right, Commissioner Richardson, will you please join me? And as Commissioner Richardson comes down, I'd like to invite Brad Martin, Robert Duncan, Vicki O'Neill, Sam Ammon, and Larry Taylor to join me here at the podium. And I'll yield the microphone to my colleague, Commissioner Curtis Richardson, for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon. It is indeed my pleasure to present this proclamation on behalf of the mayor and to present it to the hardworking employees of the city of Tallahassee who keep our utilities in good shape and on. When you flip your switch, the water running, your toilet flushing when you have to use that. But there are some things that we can do to help them continue to do their job right, and that is to make sure that we call 911 before we dig. And that's what today's 811. Okay, thank you. 811. As April has been designated Safe Digging Month, I just want to make sure you all were paying attention. So this proclamation is to designate April as Safe Digging Month in the city of Tallahassee. Whereas each year Tallahassee's vital underground utility infrastructure is jeopardized by unintentional damage by those who fail to call 811 to have underground lines located prior to digging. And whereas unintended consequences such as utility service interruption, personal injury, environmental contamination, property damage, and even death are potential results of failing to locate underground lines before digging. And whereas Sunshine 811 and the City of Tallahassee Utilities promote the national call before you dig number 811 in an effort to prevent these damages, and whereas designated by the Federal Communications Commission in 2005, 811 provides excavators and homeowners a simple toll-free number to call and request utility line locations at the intended dig site. Whereas through education of safe digging practices, excavators and homeowners can save time and money and prevent serious injury to themselves and others by calling 811 before beginning any digging project, waiting 2 full business days for locate marks, verifying utility responses, protecting the marks so they remain visible throughout the project, and finally, digging with care around the marks. Whereas all parties agree that safe digging is a shared responsibility. Now therefore, and this is from the mayor, I, Andrew Gillum, by authority vested in me as mayor of Tallahassee, do hereby extend greetings and best wishes to all observing April 2018 as Safe Digging Month in the state of Florida. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Until that was read, I didn't realize how many times it said 811, so it definitely gets across. I just wanted to thank the mayor, the commissioners, and the city manager for supporting our safety outreach efforts, and to thank our staff and Brad Martin from Sunshine 811 for their outreach to citizens to educate everybody. And it's through their hard work and efforts that we've been able to reduce third-party excavation damage in the city of Tallahassee, which makes Tallahassee safe for our citizens. Thank you.
That's all you need, I think the rest of it's Lemoyne.
Awesome. I want to now invite forward Matt Kemp, the chairman, and Tom Napier, vice chairman, for the honor flight. Where are these folks at? Matt, come on up. Come on up. First of all, before you all make your presentation, we just want to honor you for the work that they do every year now. What, 4 years? 5 years now running here in the community, taking World War II, Korean War veterans, and Vietnam veterans. Many of them, actually all of them, obviously pretty up in age. And they bring volunteers from around the community who join them in Washington, D.C. for what is a very, very special tribute for many of these veterans who have yet to see the memorials for those respective wars. And so if you all would join me in just a round of applause for Honor Flight and the great work that they do.
Thank you all. I'd like to invite all of you coming to Honor Flight because this is something special to all our hearts. We'd like to introduce Mac Langston. He's on the board of directors. Of course, you know Mac Kemp. He's the chairman, and I'm vice chairman. Talking about Honor Flight is very important to all of us. But we take 4, maybe 5. This is on our next trip would be the number 6, be May 19th. May 19th is our 6th trip. We've taken over 400 veterans from Tallahassee, North Florida rather, to Washington, D.C. There's 9 memorials. We all take them to a one-day flight. Up there in the morning and back that night. But you have never seen anybody so cheerful in all their life as veterans. They serve right to deserve when they go to the World War II, Korean, Vietnam Memorial, Iwo Jima. You haven't lived it. You see them all. We go up there one day. We leave at 0700. We eat breakfast at 0500. My job is to get that plane off the ground. At 0700, we got 10-minute layover to get there to Baltimore by 9:15. So we're all scheduled to go at each stop. Everybody, we haven't lost anybody. And my job is not to lose anybody. We got to keep track. But I'd like to tell you, Mayor, would you please come forward? Please? I'd like to show you this. Let me show you this picture. This picture was taken by the flight line aviation at the airport on one of our trips arriving back home. Now, Mayor, I'd like you to look at this because it's coming up to the General Aviation hangar. Now, we're coming in. Georgia Fire Department's on both sides. That's a salute to all the veterans in that plane. They haven't seen that picture, some of the veterans, but Tom Dunaway has made enough portraits to make some pictures. We'd like to give that to you, Mayor. We'd like to hang that somewhere in your office so you know when the jet plane comes in at night, I want you to make sure you hear it.
Yes.
Can you hear it? Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, now, let's get down to it. You're going to have this, and then that plane is on this plaque. This is presented to the city of Tallahassee for their support and always guidance for our flight each year. We could not have done it. We all make money. We kind of honor the flight to make sure we raise money to get going. But Tallahassee, the city commission, have come forward each year and support us all. They support their document to help us. But all of us, all the veterans that go, will never forget it. And everybody has always said, I'll never forget it as long as we live. We salute the veterans of World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam veterans, and it's a tribute to them. The veterans fly free. It don't cost them a dime to go all day long. They don't talk very much, get on the airplane that morning. They're kind of quiet, say something. But after they get back on the airplane, come back home, they're just all going just like that. Because they remember what they've gone through. But then we feed them with breakfast, lunch, and supper, and then we have mail call on the plane. So we urge all of you who have got friends there to make sure you have friends. Write these veterans letters, because Matt Kemp gets on the airplane and hands out all the letters to the veterans to open them up from all the family and friends. So without that, I'd like to present this to the City Commission, Mr. Mayor, and all with your support, sir.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it very much.
Remember, the airplane's going to fly over it.
I received that. I've been able to be on site for one of the returns where folks were getting off the plane, and from the hangar we could see, obviously, this display. But this picture certainly tells a more complete story of that. Know that this will be prominently hung in the City Commission suite so that all visitors to the Mayor and City Commission office will be able to appreciate this. Will you all once again give it up for the organizers and leadership of Honor Flight?
Go have breakfast with him.
Thanks again. Commissioners, we're now at the point of the meeting for public input on agenda items. These are items that are scheduled on the agenda for discussion. There will also be a time at the end of the meeting for speakers who would like to present on items that are not agended. Mr. Treasurer Clerk, are there any speakers?
Yes, Mayor, I do have a number of speaker forms. I'll call the first speaker in just a moment. Just want to let anyone else know, as some other people are arriving, if they would like to speak, they can fill out a speaker form at the table in the back. There's a red tray there. They can drop the form in. Someone will bring those forward to me as they're gathered. Also, if a speaker has something they need to hand out, they can certainly provide that to Matt Lutz. Mr. Lutz is in the back in the khaki suit, and can make sure that we have that for the record as well. At this time, speakers will have 3 minutes for their comments. There will be a timer right there in front of you as you stand at the microphone. That'll be green, and it'll go to yellow and then red as you hit the 3-minute mark. Ask you to respect that time. In this time window, we typically allot 30 minutes for speaker comments. Mayor, I've got just a little over 10 speakers, so as long as people are fairly economical with their time, and if you have a topic that you agree with someone else, you can waive your time in support of that, and I'm sure the commission will note your position and maybe even appreciate your brevity. So mainly that allows as many people as possible to speak on items. So with that, Mike Pate is our first speaker. He'll be followed by Gloria Hearns. Mr. Pate is speaking on item 1301, proposed sale of the city waterworks. If you would give your name and address for the record, you may begin.
My name is Mike Pate, 1460 St. Charles Place. I'm here today representing the Knight Creative Communities Institute and speaking on the waterworks agenda item. KCCI's focus has always been on ways to improve the economic vitality of Tallahassee, and we have done that by implementing projects that enhance our city's sense of place to attract and retain college graduates, young professionals, and the creative class. 2 years ago, one of our project teams began work to call a project that we called Reimagined Waterworks. The team's goal was to find ways to restore the main building and the remainder of the space to a viable use. They had the opportunity to continue to shape our community to make it an even more inviting place to live, work, and play. You received recommendations from the project team for the highest and best use of the historic buildings. You voted to include a historic overlay on the property, and you authorized an RFP that included some of our project team's recommendations to ensure that this site is preserved and brought back to a productive use. I moved back to Tallahassee 21 years ago, and when I moved back, one of the conversations that was going on was about the Waterworks building 21 years ago. And there were several projects and several efforts to do something about that in the past 20 years, but unfortunately, nothing has been done. Today, you can do something. Today, you have the opportunity to continue the process to return these buildings to productive use, to enhance Cascades Park and the Cascades Project, to continue the vision of what our community can become, and to make our city an even better place to live, work, and play. I encourage you to vote in favor of moving Waterworks forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Gloria Hearns, followed by Rip Colleen. As she approaches, Commissioners, I'll bring you or pass down a handout that she'd asked for us to provide you.
Good afternoon. My name is Gloria Hearns, and I reside at 2049 Eastgate Way here in Tallahassee. As he mentioned, I have prepared a package for you regarding the particular topic that I'm discussing this afternoon. This afternoon, I'd like to speak with you in reference to a dangerous building located in the Eastgate neighborhood. On behalf of the neighborhood, we are respectfully requesting the city to reconsider this home for demolition through the Neighborhood Public Safety Initiative headed by Cynthia Barber. To support our requests, on March 25th, 2017, the previous owner and an associate were manufacturing meth at this home. Consequently, a fire started in the home, which is located at 2046 Eastgate Way. Once notified of the fire, code enforcement and other officials reviewed the home and posted dangerous building signs on the property. From November through the first part of December, code enforcement advised that they were recommending this home for demolition. However, an apparent decision was made late December to auction off the property instead. On December 28, 2017, the house sold for $36,200. The only thing that the new owner has done thus far is to empty the home and place that unsightly pile on the curb. We, the neighborhood, have neighborhood concerns, and I do have personal concerns regarding the sale of this home. First of all, what are the timelines for this new owner to bring this dangerous building into compliance? Can he allow it to remain as is without any intervention from the city? Is it possible to have a contingency plan overseen by code enforcement for the new owner to meet certain timelines? This home is not a secured structure. The garage door allows entry into the home, and there are areas totally missing windows or window panes. There is a hole in the roof, which also allows entry into the home. In its current state, this home could bring more crime, and by the way, this home has basically, in the last 3 years, there's been like 74 incidents made by the police department. Not only could this home continue to bring crime into our neighborhood, but it can bring squatters and violence into our neighborhood and possibly lead to rats, snakes, and other rodents migrating across the street to my property. Not to mention being a possible hangout for teenagers in the neighborhood or people seeking a place to do drugs or other illegal activities. I have great investment in my property. It is in this current condition, this house could definitely have a huge impact on my property value should I decide to sell in the near future. This greatly concerns me because I have sacrificed a great deal of time and finances to managing my property. In closing, I have worked diligently to be a good steward over what God has blessed me with. I, along with the Eastgate neighborhood, would like to thank you for affording me this opportunity to discuss this home and its impact on our neighborhood. This home has been an eyesore in our neighborhood for over 10 years, and we sincerely pray that you will reconsider this home for demolition. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager, would you mind addressing this?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Mrs. Hearns, before you leave, Assistant City Manager Barber is right behind you. I'd like you to connect with her tonight before you leave so we can follow up on this. I appreciate your comments.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Rip Colleen, speaking on item 1001, the removal of tri-vision and static signs. And then the next speaker will be Erwin Jackson.
My name is Rip Colleen, the address 3048 Godfrey Place in Tallahassee. I'm a citizen and I favor a strong sign code and uniform enforcement of it. And I saw this agenda item where coming up at 10.01, Lamar Advertising, the largest outdoor advertising company that operates in Tallahassee, is asking for approval to swap one tri-vision and some static billboards in exchange it for a digital billboard or variable message billboard, they're called. They rely on a provision in the code which doesn't grant that kind of relief. It doesn't allow that. When you look at the code, you will see that there is a max of 3 digital billboards allowed in the city. It's right in your ordinance. You passed that when you authorized them in the first place because they were illegal. They were animated signs and they were prohibited. So you establish a max cap citywide of 3, and then you have this provision, and your attorney wanted it in there to allow you to deal with a situation where there's a billboard that neighbors are complaining about or that you want down. Now, how do you get that down? You can't buy it from a billboard company. That would cost you probably around $600,000. So how do you get it down? You can't order it down. It's just there. It's there for the life of the billboard. So this provision allowed you to deal with those special circumstances where you have a billboard that you want down or neighbors are complaining about, and because of that, you want it down. This provision allows you to find that the taking down of that billboard is in the general welfare, safety, health of the community. And if the owner agrees to take it down, you can grant them the right to put up a digital along with taking down 5, which has always been the swap, 5 static boards. So that allows a digital beyond the 3 digital cap. That's why that provision is in there. And you did that on West Gaines Street. In developing West Gaines, there were some billboards down there, and the city didn't want them there, and you negotiated under this provision a takedown of them in exchange for a digital which exceeds the 3. The 3 cap was met years ago. So when you see the language of the provision Lamar's relying on, you will see that it's site-specific, fact-specific. It was meant to deal with objectionable billboards. If you grant Lamar's request, you need to amend your ordinance to allow a swap across the lines, citywide, 1 digital for every 5 statics. That the ordinance does not allow as now written. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Erwin Jackson, and then Delatry Hollinger. Dr. Jackson's comments are on item 1102, consultant ranking for design of Market District project.
Erwin Jackson, 1341 Jackson Bluff, Tallahassee Truth Teller. For months, Nancy Miller has tried to get a big fat contract for her brother-in-law, who is in the business with a retired city department head. This self-serving act is wrong. and everyone in this room knows it. I am thankful that Commissioner Ziffer is going to ask this be brought up again and discussed. And hopefully a company's been selected for this contract, the matter should be over. But how do we prevent this from happening in the future? City commissioners, mayors, they like to give away jobs and contracts. Simple solution, an ordinance that says no family members nor retired city employees will be eligible for city jobs or city contracts, period. In addition, paid campaign staff will also fall within this non-eligible pool. We've got to get the folks generating the cash out of receiving big contracts after they assist in getting someone an election. There would need to be a new and much broader definition of family, but that shouldn't be a big deal. Employee applicants and contract applicants should certify that they have no family members working for the city. Another way that city mayors and commissioners win a lot of friends is you use city coffers to give sweetheart land deals to their friends, campaign managers and treasurers. We saw that previously when the campaign treasurer for the mayor was given a sweetheart deal with the Edison, and we can see how well that worked out. We just learned a couple days ago that he also voted to sell to Adam Corey for less than the city paid for a piece of property. Adam Corey and his related corporation paid $225,000 to the city, and then within a couple years sold it for $515,000. It was never listed on MLS. It was never properly marketed. It was an inside job, and that's how people get paid off. Solution: every city property should be listed on MLS for 30 days prior to accepting any offer. Multiple full price offers can be allowed one more opportunity to bid on the property. We have to stop the corruption, and this is corruption when you give property a couple $100,000 less than what's actually valued. And when people like me, and I'll put in a public information request, I want to be notified and have an opportunity to bid on any real estate sold by the city of Tallahassee. I've never seen such great deals, but since I'm not an insider, I probably won't be treated as fairly. Thank you very much.
The next speaker, Delatry Hollinger, waived his time on item 1301, so the next speaker will be Melissa Stoller, also on 1301, followed by Sarah Bardolph.
Here's Melissa Stoller, 639 Arbor Station Lane. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I'm also the Executive Director of the Tallahassee Trust for Historic Preservation, and I will be brief. When a historic building remains empty or unoccupied, it's inevitable that it will suffer some degree of neglect or deterioration. Over time, this essentially becomes demolition by neglect. One of the very best ways to ensure the preservation of a building is for it to be occupied, for it to have a useful life. The Waterworks is an important and significant historic building in Tallahassee. It's architecturally very unique. It's a beautiful structure. It represents a period of growth, progress, and modernity in the history of Tallahassee. When buildings remain unoccupied, we lose them. And I want to see the Waterworks preserved. I want it to have a useful life. I want the community to be able to fully enjoy it. And I want the community to be able to experience this really unique part of Tallahassee history. Last year, this commission voted to list the historic Waterworks building on the local Register of Historic Places, and I thank you for that. Unlike other historic buildings, which we have very recently lost, listing on the local register gives us a regulatory tool to manage what happens next for the Waterworks. The Tallahassee-Leon County Architectural Review Board has a say in the rehabilitation and preservation of the waterworks going forward. I know many people are skeptical right now, but I support this sale. I believe North American Properties has the resources and the ability to properly rehabilitate and preserve this building. I believe they have a clear understanding of their responsibility to this historic resource and a willingness to work in partnership with the Architectural Review Board. So my hope is that through collaboration, the historic waterworks can truly be preserved and enjoyed for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Sarah Bardolph, also on 1301, and then Garvin Bowden.
Hi, my name is Sarah Bardolph. I live at 1520 Chuli Nene. I am concerned about this proposed sale to North American Properties. Respectfully, North American Properties and the CRA have already proved to be terrible stewards of our city's history, just beginning demolition on some of the city's last examples of art modern architecture just last week. We're losing the Firestone building. They are preserving the health annex, but that was the least interesting of all of those and also the smallest. Why are we allowing this one developer based out of Ohio to decide what our city should look like? Their vision is the same in every city in which they work, and it has nothing to do with Tallahassee's aesthetic. I believe that NAP has no concern for Tallahassee's history or future beyond their own profits. I appreciate that efforts are being made to preserve the waterworks buildings and to return the structures to active use. However, I would urge the City Commission to find a local developer to work with towards these goals.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next is Garvin Bowden, speaking on item 1102, and be followed by Mark Llewellyn.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Garvin Bowden, the law firm of Gardner Bist, 1300 Thomas Wood Drive. I'm here to speak to this issue at 1102. This is a matter that we were here on last month, and what's before you is a request to reconsider. I would propose to the Commission that nothing has changed. There's no good reason to reconsider, and even if you do, your decision should be the same. We, of course, represent DPB and Associates. We were here before you and asked that you reject all of the proposals and send this matter back for rebid. That was a well-reasoned, thought-out, debated decision that this commission made. If you'll recall, there was some discussion about it. There was extensive discussion, as much as any of the matters you decided that night. Nothing has changed except that Genesis has asked that you reconsider. It has not changed that the procurement rules were not followed, that the committee was not timely filed, the evaluation committee was not timely formed. It was formed after the bids were already received and bidders were already identified. That's not changed. It's not changed that the procurement rules were not followed in the composition of the committee. This was a stormwater project. The project manager wasn't on the committee. That was required by the procurement rules. No one from stormwater was on the committee. Your own procurement rules require that everyone on the committee have requisite knowledge and technical expertise. This is a stormwater project. Those procurement rules were not followed. That has not changed. The composition of the committee and the timing of the committee, following the procurement rules, a concern of the truth tellers around here, that's not changed. That didn't change. Your decision shouldn't change. Your rationale shouldn't change. And this matter should not be reconsidered. You made a good decision in the best interest of the city, the parties involved, and the public. The rationale for that no party should be favored through the procurement process for political reasons. And just the same, Mr. Mayor, as you pointed out, no party should be disfavored for political reasons through the procurement process. If the procurement rules are followed, then we don't have a risk of that. That's not changed, and neither should your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next is Mark Llewellyn, followed by Dan Dailey. Mr. Llewellyn also on item 1102.
Mayor and Commissioners, good afternoon. My name is Mark Llewellyn. I am the CEO and President of Genesis. Our address is 2507 Callaway Road, Suite 100, 32303. I also reside in Tallahassee. We've had an office here in Tallahassee since 1993 when my family and I moved here from Tampa. On behalf of Genesis and our team, I would like to thank you for reconsidering the Market District consultant selection. It was a very difficult decision to make, for us to make this request. We're usually in the background doing our job and not having to come forward like this. But I believe it is vitally important for decisions like this to be made based on all the available data. You're getting only part of the story. We hope that you've taken this opportunity to review the documents that have been provided and have received a full briefing from the city staff on the selection process. I believe you'll find that process was professionally conducted in accordance with city policy, which is subsequently confirmed by former City Attorney Lou Shelley, which I know you all respect. You know, Genesis has been blessed over the years to have the opportunity to work on many major projects for the city, county, Blueprint, school board, and FDOT that have improved our community. A few of the more notable projects include Blairstone Road, Gain Street, FAMU Way, which is currently ongoing, Capitol Cascade Trail Master Plan, Franklin Boulevard, and Cascades Park, which is probably the best example of a holistic approach to a project which needed to be implemented on the Market District. The Market District project was not simply a stormwater project. Genesis was selected to complete these projects through the RFP process, which included, in all cases, presentations. Technical proposals and presentations are the typical process for selecting professional engineering consultants for major projects. Market District was not the exception to the selection process, so don't be misled by that. The process of selecting professional engineering services for the Market District was long. Over 8 months was invested by your staff and consultants in preparing the RFP, reviewing responses, conducting presentations, and addressing an inappropriate protest by a non-bidder. Genesis has invested over 500 hours of time in pursuit of the project. And I would expect that all three firms that submitted invested a similar amount of time, and I'm certain that all three firms approached this with the intent to win the selection. As you know, ultimately the Commission voted to reissue the RFP at the last meeting. I ask today, based on the additional information and background that has been provided, that you please reconsider that action.
Excuse me, you're at 3 minutes.
Based on staff's recommendation, Genesis is the best qualified firm to complete the project, and we hope that you have the opportunity to do so, that we have the opportunity to do so. We're also here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Dan Dailey, also on 1102, followed by Kim Ross.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Dan Dailey, Schutz and Bowen on behalf of Genesis Group. First, thank you very much. As you know, the other day we sent you an executive summary and a legal analysis on this issue. Hope you had a chance to take a look at it. I know you did. You know, there are several issues that have been raised by a non-proposer in this issue. As far as we're concerned, the RFP was in full compliance with all state and local procurement requirements. Any deviation was minor, warranted, and permissible by your own code. You know, you raised, for example, DPP likes to mention that there was a substitution on the evaluation committee. As you are all well aware, this was done purposely to avoid the appearance of a conflict, actually to preserve the integrity of the process, not complicate it. Next, they like to raise the fact that there was an oral presentation. Oral presentations were outlined in the RFP. Every proposer and non-proposer, for that matter, knew that an oral presentation was a possibility. And ladies and gentlemen, these are not unheard of. It allows the evaluations committee to dig deeper, to ask questions, to get over the depth and breadth of the project and the services that are being offered. Just because you don't like the result of an oral presentation doesn't make it non-permissible. Rebidding in this case is unjust, not only to Genesis, but to the other proposers as well. The proposers that put forth bids made the conscious business decision. They invested time, money, and effort. Rebidding this contract allows a non-proposer who consciously decided not to submit a proposal a second bite, an unjust second bite at the apple. At this, I don't think that was me. At this point, we all know the cat is out of the bag, right? The RFP information is public. This allows, through any rebid, any proposer at that point to use that information to their advantage and the disadvantage of those that got in this game the first time. Out of the 3 proposers on this project, none of them are challenging the outcome. DRMP, DPB's prime, does not contest the outcome. Your former city attorney, Llewellyn, opined that DPB has no legal right to even challenge the outcome. DPB's allegations against staff are baseless conspiracy theories. To date, no evidence has been provided, no information has been provided. By their own contention, they say they don't have to provide any. The case law says differently. I think it's important to note that only after the evaluation committee made their ranking did DPB object to anything in this process. DPB calls into question the legitimacy of the process by stating things like there weren't enough engineers. There were no engineers, there weren't enough engineers. A simple Google search will show you that 3 of the 5 people on the evaluation committee were engineers. As a matter of fact, the evaluation sheets showed that DPB was scored higher by what they call unqualified committee members than they were by the engineers. So at one second they're asking that more engineers and more qualified people be included, but they were actually scored lower by those, quote, qualified people.
Excuse me, your 3 minutes have expired.
Thank you, sir. At this point, Genesis is the most responsible and responsive proposer. We ask for your favorable reconsideration on this item. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mayor, the next speaker is Kim Ross. She's speaking on item 1301, the Waterworks project, and she'll be followed by Heidi Otway, also on the same item.
Hi, I'm Kim Ross, 1203 Buckingham Drive. I have some serious concerns about the process that was used in the sale of this property. In the case of this sale, there was only one purchaser. Now, having managed multi-million-dollar procurements at the state level, I'm very familiar with the procurement process. And we all know that when there is one purchaser, there's cause for concern and due diligence. My cause for concern goes toward the process that is being used. What process is being used to solicit land buyers, and should it be updated to meet current conditions? The reason for due diligence is even more important. It's simply that when there is only one purchaser, they hold a lot of the power, especially in the case of this property that we've been trying to renovate for 20 years. However, right now, in this moment, is the point where you hold the most power. And I would urge the city not to approve the sale until at least they handle at least one more process issue. That process issue concerns transparency of the process, as well as ensuring that your citizens' concerns are taken into account. Too many times I've seen the citizens find out about an issue after the fact. Among others, I've seen this with Frenchtown, and I've seen this with Cascades Grove. There's absolutely a problem with the process for your public notification, and one important thing that this board can do is to have staff update that process notification. I'm not sure what that'll look like, be it notification early on to a few key community leaders or notification via more modern channels, but I would assert to you that notification early on and dealing with community concerns early on is better than them feeling left out at the end. In other words, it's better than what you may be dealing with after the public hearings. Now, I'll save my comments directly related to Cascade Grove for later, but the thing that they have in common is this purchaser. And this purchaser, unfortunately, now has a reputation for cutting down patriarch trees. I'm not a tree expert, but I know 2 things. First, there are no large live oak trees on that property on Waterworks. Second, there are large trees on the site. So we have a tree ordinance in place, but that tree ordinance has turned from being a decision point, yes or no, on keeping that tree and revising the plans to accommodate it, to just a pay-to-play type ordinance where the developer has to pay a fine for cutting the tree. I think it's time to go back to the former. So tying all of this together, I would like to suggest that the commission tonight, while you have the most power, you will have on this particular site and issue stall the sale of the property until you minimally have some guarantees from the developer that they will save as many native trees as possible, or until you have some assurances that the property has had its trees assessed and the developer and the staff have worked with the community, and particularly the tree experts, to do as much as they can in their plans to save the trees that can and should be saved. Please note, I am not asking you to stop or halt the project altogether. In fact, I really rather like the design. But one thing that isn't clear is in that conceptual design, is it the green space? Is it native trees? Is it the existing native trees? Or is it newly planted small trees?
Excuse me, your 3 minutes have expired.
Thank you. And so I would guarantee you that if it's that late, if it's the latter, if it's newly planted small trees, you'll be dealing again with another issue of an upset public. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Next speaker.
Heidi Otway, and then Darwin Campbell. And then I believe that'll get us toward our 30 minutes. We do have a couple more speakers, but all on items that we've already had or heard addressed in one way or another.
Heidi Otway, 117 South Gadsden Street. Good afternoon, Mayor Gillum and Commissioners. As Board Chair of the Greater Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce, I'm here to show support for the City Commission's ongoing work to help create jobs and enhance our economy. The Chamber believes the Waterworks project before you today is another important part of your efforts. When I assumed the Chamber leadership last fall, I shared that I want Tallahassee and our Chamber to support initiatives that make this community a place where people can live, work, and play, but more importantly, they can start and grow a business. I believe the $350 million impact of the Cascades project, the 700 permanent jobs, and creating a vibrant new area of our city and downtown does just that. And the Waterworks project is a bonus. Waterworks has a unique character, a historic use, and it is part of what makes downtown special. With the work to save the historic health department on the Cascades project, we retain important parts of Tallahassee's past. The Chamber is also focused on retaining talent. Our graduates from FSU, FAMU, and TCC are young professionals who want a vibrant downtown. For many of them, including baby boomers, what could be more invigorating than living in a townhome at the Cascades project, working out at the gym facing a park, taking long walks through the park, connecting with friends, and ending up at one of the new restaurants that could accompany the project, or possibly even stopping by Waterworks for iced coffee if that's what they decide to do with that project. As a soon-to-be empty nester, this is a lifestyle that my husband and I are strongly considering since my company is located downtown. This is the urban lifestyle that we don't have yet in Tallahassee, and we believe it will be have a positive impact on being able to keep our young professionals in this community. I want to commend you on the work that you're doing to engage the community. I also want to commend the KCCI Waterworks group that provided important guidance and feedback. We see the vision and the dream that you have for this part of downtown, and we support the sale of the Old City Waterworks to North American Properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Thank you. Next is Darwin Campbell.
Good afternoon. I'm Darwin Campbell, 1248 Halifax Court. I just want to give you a few things to think about before you sell the old Waterworks property. First, I think the trees on that property deserve a little bit better treatment than the trees on the property across the street from there got. Second, the sale price, $408,000, I think is kind of low. The property appraiser's website says the fair market value is $475,000. The bid went out at a minimum of $370,000 based on, we're told, a recent appraisal. Now, I know different appraisers have different ideas about what property is worth, but that's a $105,000 gap. Before you sell that property, you might want to ask about that recent appraisal. Finally, we're supposed to be in an economic recovery, and yet brick and mortar businesses aren't doing so hot right now. Toys R Us, it's going under nationwide. Winn-Dixie is closing stores, including 2 in Tallahassee. News reports tell us that the center of Tallahassee is having trouble attracting businesses to that location. Now, the business plans for the old Waterworks property may work out just fine or may not. North American may still own the property in a decade, or it may not. However the ownership shakes out, this commission needs to ensure that the historic features and the natural features on that property are preserved and maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers this afternoon. For anyone who would like to make comments later in the meeting, we do have a time set aside for additional comments. Commissioners, we are now on consent items. Item 9.01 was pulled from consent. Is there a motion on the remainder of consent?
Move consent.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve consent. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes 4-0. Commissioners, we're now on items pulled from consent, item 10.01.
Mayor, I had asked that that be pulled because Mr. Colleen does have some important points that he's brought up as far as consistency of that specific action with the code. But as he pointed out, there's a gap there. And I have discussed this with the city attorney's office. And Mr. Lou Norvell is coming up from the attorney's office to answer those questions for us, for all of us, as to how you square the request with the code.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This matters before the Commission under a code provision which allows for the removal of billboards in exchange for the permitting of a digital sign, or what the code refers to as a variable message sign. Here, the proposal is to eliminate 2 fixed or static billboards and what is referred to as a tri-vision sign. The tri-vision sign is a sign where the face of the sign changes and there are motors which turn strips or segments of the sign. In exchange for the removal of these signs, a variable message sign would be permitted with 2 faces. And as I mentioned, the code authorizes this exchange. Tri-vision signs are generally being eliminated due to the mechanical operation of the signs. They have maintenance and operational issues, and I understand that the sign to be exchanged is the last tri-vision sign in the Lamar Advertising inventory here in the city. Under the incentive or the exchange provision, we have had a net decrease in the number of billboards. In the last 6 years, the Commission has approved exchanges, reducing the number of billboards, including exchanges in 2012, 2 in 2015, and an exchange in 2016. Due to the exchange provisions and other provisions in the sign code, the number of billboards, or the number in the inventory, continues to drop. According to the building official, in 2005, when we capped the number of off-site signs, we had 216 in the inventory. We now have 155, and if this item is approved, we will have 153. The speaker made a comment about the initial numbers for the tri-vision and the variable message signs. There is a separate provision in the code. When the tri-vision and the variable message signs were approved in 2006, the code did provide for 6 initial tri-vision and 3 variable message signs, and a number of static billboards had to be exchanged in return for those permits. This incentive provision is a separate provision. Finally, I'll note that the sign code contains a number of other restrictions. The digital sign can't have animation, flashing lights, moving text, illumination is regulated. Face of the sign can't change more than every 6 seconds. There's spacing regulations. And finally, billboards are only allowed in a handful of zoning districts. And here the zoning district is CP, or Commercial Parkway, and is located on Capitol Circle Northeast. I'll be happy to answer any question. We also have with us Glenn Dodson, the building official, and other folks from Growth Management.
Commissioner Miller.
Well, I just wanted to understand how you got to the 5. How did you get to the 5?
So, Commissioner, the code does set some values out for exchange. It does provide an exchange of 5 static for 1 digital or variable message. It provides a value exchange of 3 for tri-vision. So what we've taken those values and given a credit of 3 for the tri-vision and the 2 static signs to result in the 1 digital or variable message sign.
Okay, so this means that I believe I heard you say there were no more for this
rippling. Lamar Advertising, my understanding is this is the last Tri-Vision sign in their inventory.
So this won't come up. Where I was going with that was, do we need to change the code? But this shouldn't come up again, right?
There may be one other Tri-Vision in the city, but if there is, and I'm looking at the building official, there's one other Tri-Vision in the city.
Okay. Well, you might consider that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I spoke with the city attorney before this. Occasionally, from time to time, my company contracts with Lamar for outdoor advertising space. I don't have any with them right now, but I was advised by the city attorney it doesn't present a conflict.
Thank you.
I'll move the item.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the item. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes 0-4. 4-0, I apologize. We're on to item 11.01, appointment of homeless continuum of care board member. Is there a motion?
Move the item.
Commissioner Ziffer, question?
Well, the item requires us to identify a commissioner, correct?
Oh, I'm sorry.
If I could offer this up, I have been the commissioner on the Continuum Care Board, and unfortunately, because of my travel as of late, it's been difficult for me to attend most of the meetings. I do still have a desire to serve in that capacity. So since they have made the board, Continuum Care, changed their bylaws to allow a representative from the city, who I believe would be Michael Parker when I can't make it, and serve in my place, I'd be more than happy to offer to fill that seat as long as Michael Parker is able to attend those meetings.
Great. Without objection? Thank you, Commissioner.
I nominate Commissioner Ziffer to be appointed.
There's a motion
Second.
and a second to nominate Commissioner Ziffer for that post. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, we're now on to item 11.02. Commissioner Ziffer.
This is me. Mr. Mayor and Commissioner, because there are only three of us now. Last meeting was a weird meeting, as you may recall. There were a lot of things that were going on. And while the attorney, Garvin, said that nothing has changed, for me, a little bit has changed in that because of all those things that did occur, I also went back and reviewed the comments by the city attorney, Llewellyn. And I was compelled, after reading that and also receiving the information from the attorney for Genesis, to reconsider where I was on that vote. And so while I'm not sure there's an appetite on the part of my two colleagues down here, I would offer and make a motion that we reconsider that vote and go back and actually follow staff's recommendation, which, having read all that material, I now believe was probably the appropriate thing to do, to go back and award the contract to Genesis.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Dies for a lack of second. Commissioners, we're now on to item 12.01. Introduction of ordinances. And Commissioner Miller, you may return. I know she exited for fear of a conflict.
So we're on to item number 12.01. This is introduction of ordinance number 18-0-12. First and only public hearing scheduled for the joint meeting of the City Commission and the Leon County Board of County Commissioners on April 10, 2018 at 6:00 p.m. in chambers of the Leon County Board of County Commissioners at the Leon County Courthouse. An ordinance of the City of Tallahassee adopting large-scale map and text amendments to the 2030 Tallahassee-Leon County Comprehensive Plan, providing for severability and conflicts and providing for an effective date. We'll note that it has been introduced. Item number 12.02 is the introduction of ordinance number 18-Z-05, first of two public hearings scheduled for the joint meeting of the City Commission and Leon County Board of County Commissioners on April 10, 2018 at 6:00 p.m. in the chambers of Leon County Board of County Commissioners at Leon County Courthouse. Second and final public hearing scheduled for April 25, 2018 at 6:00 p.m. in the City of Tallahassee City Commission chambers at City Hall. This is an ordinance of the City of Tallahassee, Florida, designating and including additional territory as an in-university transition on the official zoning map of the City of Tallahassee, adopted and established by the City Commission, providing for conflict and severability and providing for an effective date. We'll show that one as introduced. Final item number 12.03 is the introduction of ordinance number 18-Z-10, first and only public hearing scheduled for April 25th, 2018 at 6:00 p.m. in the City of Tallahassee City Commission chambers at City Hall. This is an ordinance of the City of Tallahassee, Florida, amending the Ox Bottom Meadows Plan Unit Development Concept Plan on the official zoning map of the City of Tallahassee, adopted and established by the City Commission, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. We'll show that one is introduced as well.
Great. Please show all three items introduced without objection. Commissioners, we're now at item 13.01. City Manager.
Sure. Mayor and Commissioners, you authorized a request for proposals, or RFP, for the sale of the old historic Waterworks building last July. That process is now complete, and based on that process, staff recommends that you sell the property to North American Properties, or what is referred to as NAP. Assistant City Manager Wayne Tedder has been involved in that, as well as our Judy Donahoe, our Director of Real Estate, and they are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the item and up with a comment also.
There's a motion?
Second.
And a second. Commissioner.
I think, because Mayor, you were here, it's got to be about 12 years ago. A group of us came to the City Commission and were able to get funds to restore part of that Waterworks building back to a point where at least it stopped most of the downhill slide that it was on. When we did that, part of the conversation was what we envisioned conceivably that structure could become, which is exactly what's been brought to us. And so I wholeheartedly support the sale of the property. The plans that you presented are what we want in our downtown area, and I look forward to being one of your first customers, hopefully. And so I move that item.
Right, Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to correct some comments that have been made earlier about North American Properties. They have been an excellent partner with the City of Tallahassee. They have been very responsive to the city and the citizens of this community. They have been very responsible partners. If you look at the work that they've done on Gaines Street, it has been done in a very responsive manner. They have invested millions of dollars into the Tallahassee community in partnership with the Community Redevelopment Agency and the City of Tallahassee. And I don't think any of us would have a problem with the properties that they have developed there. They have made a commitment to this community and its future. They are here for the long term. They have agreed to invest for the long term in this community in an appropriate way, in partnership with the local community. And I have said on a number of occasions that they are a model for the kind of partnership that we want to see between our city, our Community Redevelopment Agency, and developers in this community who do it responsibly and in concert with all of the stakeholders. And so for that reason, or those reasons, I wholeheartedly support this item as well.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I do too, and I'm most excited about the fact that we're putting, hopefully, yet another historic building back, bringing it back to life. I share Ms. Stoller's interest in doing that. She's absolutely right that when buildings are left alone to just fester, they just don't do well. They need loving care on a relatively daily basis, and especially older ones, which are the historic ones that we have in our community. So I'm very appreciative of the fact that someone did step up and offer. You know, I heard comments about the fact that there's only one offer, but the problem is that that building has been left there empty for generations now, and there were no offers to buy it. There were attempts made to sell it in the past, and they just came to nothing. So I'm really glad that there is a buyer, actually, and appreciate the sensitivity you have shown in everything that you've done and how you've listened to the community and tried to incorporate our concerns, especially into the projects that you brought forward. So thank you, and I will be supporting this.
There's a motion and a second on the item. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. We're on to item 13.02, City Manager.
I'll move acceptance.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve this settlement. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Item 13.04.
Move the item, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve Eastside Parking Garage item.
Item,
Nope.
you're skipping
Supervisor
1303?
I'm so sorry, I jumped right ahead. The contract with the Supervisor of Elections, very important. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Now 13.04.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, staff has been reviewing the future of the East Side Parking Garage, which is on Calhoun and College. The garage has 768 parking spaces that support public parking for the surrounding businesses, the Leon County Courthouse, and in the future will support the Washington Square development that's getting underway. Staff projects that there's a long-term need for these spaces and has identified several options for consideration. Essentially, staff is looking at the long-term prosperity and viability of this structure that's been in place for some time now, and there's a need to rehab it to some extent, as well as a need to deal with the property that the facility sits on. Judy Donahoe is here, and I'd like her to give a short presentation on this as additional background.
Thank you very much, Mr. City Manager, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm here to give you a brief presentation on the history and the future of the East Side Garage. The two pictures that you see in front of you are two depictions. The top left is looking northeast on Calhoun Street to the transient entrance to the garage. This is where the hourly and daily parkers enter and exit. The bottom right picture shows the monthly parking entrances on College Avenue. Next, I have an aerial view for you that shows how the ownerships are on the full city block where the East Side Garage is located. What you see in yellow are actually three parcels of land under two leases that the city has, and it is, of course, part of the East Side Garage. The pink is owned in fee. The land is owned by the city, and south of that is where the Washington Square development is going to be located. Locationally, you have College on the north. You have you have Gadsden on the east, and you have Jefferson on the south, and Calhoun on the west side. This is a view looking westward. You see the East Side Garage with parking on the upper deck. That's the 6th level, and immediately to the west is where the Washington Square development is going to be. The first floor of the East Side Garage, which you can just see there at the bottom of the building, we have under an easement agreement with Washington Square so that to assist them with their development of the Washington Square. We had Design Work Studio, which is part of the planning department, do some massing studies for us. And what you're looking at here is a depiction of a possible new garage using just the city-owned parcel. As you can see, it's awkwardly shaped, and we would actually have to use mechanical means to have parking on that garage because of its configuration. And here we have a potential new garage using all the parcels, and you can see it would be a much more functional garage, and it would give us up to 1,000 or more spaces. But there's some definite issues with going ahead and trying to put a garage on all of those spaces, or all of that land. The primary problem or concern is that we don't own the parcels that are in the brown there. Those are the parcels that we have under land lease, and we would need to acquire either additional land rights or fee ownership to continue with any plans to develop that. Further, there are some prohibitions in the leases regarding the demolition of the garage. There's a very high cost of building a garage right now, even if we had a cost-sharing P3. In the uncertainty of the future demand for traditional car ownerships. Okay, the recommended option is to direct staff to negotiate a purchase with the owners of the 3 leased properties and expend approximately $400,000 for immediate repairs to assure the stability of the garage during construction of the Washington Square development.
Move option 1, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve option 1. Thank you, Ms. Donahue. All those any questions? Commissioner Miller.
In this agenda item, there was I think somewhere there was a reference to building a new parking garage, and you've determined that's not feasible.
Well, we have several obstacles to overcome, Commissioner. The first is that we don't own all the land, and I believe it would be better for us as financially to own the land before we entered into the construction of a new garage. It's also extremely expensive. Even with a P3 potential, we're looking at $25,000 per parking space. And if we do 1,000 spaces, that's $25 million. That's a lot of money. And we're also getting quite a bit of information in from the parking authorities across the country and from planning organizations that are telling us that with ride shares such as Uber and Lyft, et cetera, and driverless vehicles, the future of personal car ownership is not as strong as it may have been projected even a few years ago. So our recommendation is to let's at least for the time being invest some money, keep the garage as it is, and negotiate with the property owners so that we can have ownership and control of all of the land.
All right, that's good. I think that's great. Somehow I got the impression that wasn't going to be as straightforward a task to accomplish.
It isn't. Well, right, there are some complications with that. The owners have expressed concern and perhaps some reluctance to sell, and so we'd have to enter into negotiations.
All right, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. There is a motion and a second on the item. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, we're now on to item 13.06. Mr. Cook. I'm sorry, we're going to do an update on public safety 05. I think I keep almost.
You made the chief's evening almost.
I know. He's ready to get out of here.
The 2017 Uniform Crime Report statistics are now available, Commissioners. The last update you received was through November of 17. The full year is now in, and the data that we have compiled and the chief will share with us is what has been reported to FDLE and what you see that's ultimately incorporated county by county. Those results are made public for the state sometime in the summer, June or July. So the chief is going to share with us how we ended 2017. He's also going to give us an update on some efforts in our bond community as well as the top 10 list. You may recall the last update, there was a lot of progress on the top 10 list that's been in place for maybe half a year now.
Yes, sir.
A lot of success, so we're going to get an update on that. Chief?
Thank you, sir. Good evening. It's been, as Manager Goad said, a few months since we got an update on the crime stats. We finished our yearly report and sent it to FDLE for their review and approval. I'm pleased to report that with the collaborative work of not just the law enforcement agencies, but our community partners, that we've seen a 14.3% decrease in crime in 2017 as compared to 2016. So that there's a lot of good work that's been done, a lot of progress. Obviously, we want to continue to build on that progress and move forward. And to kind of put that in perspective, that just the 14.3% decrease, in 2017, we were reporting our lowest violent crime total since 2013 and our lowest crime rate since 2013. So that's tremendous progress we've made in the last year or so. that's a lot. I wanted to, thank you too, because that's a lot of the resources that we've been putting in place over the last, 4 years that I've been here, and all of you have been serving on the commission at that time. The new officers, the new programs, the community policing philosophy, the technology investments, all those pieces as we put together, we're seeing the progress that we're making. Not one way, the numbers that we report, but also I think we see that in our community relationships and our community participation when we go out and have different events and working together, and the progress that we're making. And I'll touch on that with the Bond neighborhood as well in a few minutes. As you recall, the last summer and then into the fall, last summer, you approved us doing an audit on our uniform crime report to make sure that we were reporting statistics and following the best practices. We had contracted with PRI Management Group. Our auditor, Mr. Ed Claughton, is here this evening, so if you've got additional questions, that he can answer them. We started that in the fall of 2017. Like I said, we wanted to ensure best reporting practices to make sure we were doing it, though not just technically correct, but most appropriate way, make sure that we were up to current standards. During the audit, Mr. Claughton did identify some technical errors through the software programming that we were using, which is a system that we will be replacing early next year, and also some human errors that actually resulted in over-reporting. So we're actually reporting more incidents than had occurred, which is better than us under-reporting and someone thinking that we're playing number games. So what we've done to address this, Mr. Claughton actually just a few weeks ago provided 3 days of training for not just our record staff, but also our officers and supervisors as well, to make sure that it's a holistic process between the initial report being taken, documented, the supervisors looking for the right aspects of the report to make sure they're documented properly, and then also on the back end with our record staff, making sure that they're being recorded and reported properly as well to FDLE. In addition, what we've done is we've continued our relationship with Mr. Claughton. He's going to continue to work with us all through 2018 to make sure as month by month that he's going to validate our statistics and audit those to make sure that we continue to stay on the right track, and to help us ensure that all the information from 2017 and 2018 that we're going to import into our new system that goes live in January of 2019 is correct and accurate. So we're going to have a strong foundation moving into the future of accurate and valid information. He's also going to help us work with our new records management system to make sure that the technical errors that existed in the current system don't get put into place as the new system is constructed and built. So that's an overview of the audit. That's the 2-minute synopsis I just gave you is in no way indicative of all the work that's gone into this, not just on the auditor's part, but our staff who had to go back and re-enter and revalidate. Our record staff, Major Scott is here. I don't know where he's right back. He's trying to hide back there. But the work that they've done the last few months to get us and address the concerns, get us to where we need to be, has been no small task. And they've put a lot of extra hours in to make sure that we're reporting the most accurate information possible, not just for now, but also that we'll get that strong foundation for the future.
Thank you very much, Chief. On behalf of the commission, and I know commissioners will make their own comments, but want to thank you and your leadership team and obviously our line officers for the amazing job in concert with our other law enforcement partners in this area and what we've accomplished and what you all specifically have accomplished over this last year. Obviously wish you all well and continued success. Commissioner Richardson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to echo those same remarks, and Chief, to commend you for the leadership that you have provided, your leadership team, all of the hardworking police officers at the Tallahassee Police Department, the law enforcement collective, and all of those involved, the sheriff, the state attorney, the U.S. Marshal, I think, is involved, and the work that you have put into making our community safer. I've always felt safe in the city of Tallahassee. Did we have some crime issues? Certainly. None of us dispute that. But this is a safe community, and I hate portrayals of our community being some lawless place that people should be afraid to even walk out of their door, because that's not the Tallahassee that I live in, and I live on the south side of town and have for the past 25 years, and I feel very safe in my neighborhood. But we have, as you mentioned, have put the resources where they were needed to hire additional police officers, to give you the technology and other resources that you've needed to be successful, and the numbers bear that out. But even more important than the numbers is how our neighbors feel in their communities, that they can feel that their children can go outside and play, and that they can play in our parks and drive our roads and streets and feel safe. And that's what's more important than anything else. And certainly we are not exactly where we want to be. We still want to, I mean, I would be content with no crime at all, but we know that certainly is not going to be the case. But we're headed in the right direction, and we're going to continue to make Tallahassee be the model for other states, not only in the state, cities in the state of Florida, but certainly throughout this nation. And Chief, we expect that under your continued leadership. And we look forward to the partnership that we've established between the Commission and your department to make that happen.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes, and thank you for this really good report. You know, when we sit up here and we tell you to go out there and bring that crime rate down, just fix it, it's basically the direction that we give you because we are not experts in your field. I remember asking you to do a strategic plan so that we would to give us some guidance as to what do you need this year, what do you need next year. But you and your collective and Ms. Barber's staff too and the officers, everyone has pulled together with so many innovative approaches. And I'd like to ask you to consider I'm not directing staff, city manager, I would like to consider that your staff does my view that really explains some of the ways that they've really been resourceful to get the collective together, get everybody going in the same direction, the top 10, these types of things that really help all of us understand what you've done, how innovative you've tried to be, and the programs that have been put in place to get the results you've gotten, and hopefully will continue on that downward trend. Thank you.
I assume that's a yes or something.
Yeah, we can certainly take care of that. Thank you, ma'am.
Great. Chief, anything else, sir?
Just a quick update on the Bond neighborhood. We're continuing to focus on that with our neighborhood public safety initiative. A few weeks ago, we had a community event there. We usually do a quarterly event we used to call TPD and U, and then we kind of switched it up, and we're starting to do it in the evenings, trying to draw more people, so it was called Evening with the Chief. We went a little daring outside of my comfort zone, and we actually did it on Facebook Live and allowed people to comment and ask questions even though they didn't show up. So, and we all know you never know what's going to happen on the internet. The nice part, we had a great physical presence. We had probably close to 50 people showed up from the neighborhood to discuss concerns and bring up things, and people that also sent in questions. And we got a lot of very positive feedback. Most people that were there were to thank us and appreciate the efforts, and say, obviously, just like we said, Commissioner Richardson, we all want no crime. And we all want this. We all want to live in vibrant, safe neighborhoods, but they can see the difference in the efforts that not just the police department, but the city's making, the collective, the extra emphasis that code enforcement is putting in place, the purchasing of some of the properties that were dilapidated. Obviously, we know that speeds has been a kind of a thorn in our side and the community side down there for a long time, the little convenience store. We've had a lot of good conversations. The owner is very engaged with us now and has been very responsive. And if you go by Speeds now, it's a very different store than it's been 12 months ago and 12 years ago, as far as the congregation and different kind of activities that were going on. So we're looking forward to taking that footprint there and expanding it out further and further. So that was a very successful evening, getting that feedback and that communication. And then just the last time you got an update on the top 10 list was January at the retreat. Since then, we've made 5 additional arrests off the list. If you notice, we're getting to the point where we've actually arrested more than 10 people, because when one person comes off, we put a new person back on. And as we continue to identify them with our different partners, you've got a list in the agenda item. Patrick Collins was arrested for home invasion robbery. Robert Hanger was arrested for auto theft. Tatarian Donaldson was arrested for armed burglary and grand theft of a firearm. Carrick Cromidi was arrested for trafficking controlled substance. And Michael Sanders was arrested for driver while license suspended and possession of a controlled substance. So we continue to focus on those individuals that collectively, us, the Sheriff's Office, FSUPD, FAMUPD, the Capitol Police, the U.S. Attorney, the State Attorney, that we share information and intelligence. We have another public safety collective meeting next week, and we also have bi-weekly intelligence meetings where we invite all the local agencies together and we share information to focus on those people that are the greatest threat to our community and continue to work on getting them off the streets. So again, it's that collaborative efforts that we're all putting forward. Yeah, any questions for myself or Mr. Claude?
Commissioner Richardson.
Just one more thing I wanted to add, because it's a very important element of the success that the chief has achieved in the collective, is the relationship with the neighborhoods and making sure that they're involved. I don't know that the relationship between neighborhoods, particularly in certain areas of our city, and the police department have been better than they are now. There's communication. The community-oriented policing strategies are working. The relationships are being built. And I just, again, want to commend you for that, Chief, because that's been an element that's been missing for a long time. The trust is being built. The relationships are there. And that's been a critical element as well, because people are willing now to even report crime more often when they see it or hear something going on. So that's a key element that I wanted to make sure that we emphasized.
You know, just as a piggyback to that, we have all acknowledged that law enforcement in and of itself can't fully solve a crime problem, and so the funding, and although we're not talking about them today, but the human services entities that have also risen to the occasion to address some of the more systemic elements of this. Last night I sat at Community Connections, and for every young person going through that program, there is a companion adult in the room. And the success rate of that program with regard to reducing the recidivism rate is off the charts. And these young people who have nearly all had previous encounters or run-ins with the law are mastering a language of communication that would be the envy of any married couple I know by the way they are listening, being empathetic, and developing a whole new skill outside of violence and so on and so forth. You all have before sort of undercut this whole thing about highest violent crime city, and I think that's a label that you all have rejected based off the numbers, based off the facts. It is one that is still used. I just want to put into context, I was in Jacksonville earlier this week where the community was lamenting their 17th death of a child in 2 years, of a child. And the sensationalism that seems to engulf our community around this. As we've said, no crime is the goal, right? We want to put you out of business. I fear that won't happen. But I think the closer we get every day and the efforts you all are undertaking are noteworthy, and I want to underscore Commissioner Miller's suggestion around how you communicate that. You know the saying, it's a poor frog that won't praise his own pond. Well, you got a little bit of appreciating to do of and I think reflecting to the community what you all have actually accomplished. It is noteworthy.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Commissioners, thank you very much. Chief, thank you very much. Commissioners, we're now on to item 13.06, Public Records Policy Amendment. Mr. Cook.
I'll move option 1.
Second.
There's a motion. Mr. Cook, for the purposes of the wide discussion on public records issues, if you could just give us a quick...
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. Because you prompted me, I had learned long ago that there's a motion and a second not to speak unless asked to speak, but I was asked to speak. What this does is we have long had commission policies on public records and records retention. There were 2 policies. One of the things this does is combines those 2 into one so that there's a central place for both of those components. Also, it's been some time since we updated the policy, so these updates include specific references to electronic communications and things of that nature so that our policy is keeping up with current means of communication and public records creation. This will be something that over time we'll come back with amendments and adjustments as means of communication and technology change. This also incorporates components of the settlement agreement which you previously approved regarding some of those public records matters. So we think it's a comprehensive approach and an update, and seek your approval.
Great. There is a motion and a second to approve the item. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Item 13.07.
This item requests the award of a construction contract for our water quality lab. The city operates a certified environmental laboratory that conducts more than 100,000 analyses each year from more than 12,000 samples. Those samples come from our potable water supply, our wastewater supply, and our stormwater supply. It's a very professional lab. I think each of you have had the opportunity to visit it over the years, and we have scientists and experts that operate it. Well, the lab itself is at the end of its life. It was constructed in 1966, and it's been refurbished and remodeled a number of times. We're at the point where we need a new lab. We have sought bids on that, and tonight we're recommending that we issue, that you award a contract to CSI Contracting as the lowest responsive bidder to the request for proposals that we've issued. I think it would be worthwhile to have John Buss go over just a bit of information as it relates to the ranking of that bid. So if you'll indulge me, I'd like him to share that with you. We've got a graphic I think we can display, and he can walk us through it.
Okay.
Okay. Today I learned that one of the bidders on this project, Advon, had written the commission expressing some concerns of the bid process and the bid numbers. We strive to be transparent in what we're in all of our processes, and I think it's definitely worth going through some numbers to show you how the bid selection was made and why it's valid. One of their first concerns was that the CSI Inc. is who we're proposing to make award to, and one of their first concerns about that was that their bid was 4 minutes late. And the bid invitation for bids does say that you need to be there at the exact time, but it also says that if a bid is late because of city actions, that it can be accepted. The bid, CSI went to the 3rd floor on City Hall where procurement used to be, but where the invitation for bids said to deliver your bids. It took them 4 minutes to learn that procurement had moved to the 4th floor to walk up there and get it stamped. I think it was appropriate for procurement to accept that bid because the location for submittal was not correct in the invitation for bids. And as they say, the invitation for bid makes a provision for such events. Another one of their concerns was that the bids had expired. And we had already done our analysis of bids. We knew who the low bidder was, and the low bidder had given us an extension on the bid deadline. So his bid has not expired. CSI's bid has not expired. The rest of their, it's not very bright, is it? Well, I'm just going to have to tell you what's on there. That's the bid tabulation that procurement published. And the numbers, one of Advon's concerns was that the bid tabulation doesn't reflect the bids, the actual bids submitted. But they do, and I'm sorry that that's not a better picture, but again, we only learned of this today and threw this together rapidly. But the top row of yellow numbers are the base bids, and they're taken directly off page 1 of each of the bidders. So that is the correct number. The next row down there is the total cost of the city, and it has to do with a bid alternate 1 that was selected. And those numbers are also on there, but many of them have errors. And you'd think that would be unusual, but it's not. And for that reason, we always analyze all the bids to make sure the math's correct, et cetera. The second low bidder was a company called Sheffield, and this is their itemization. Again, it's hard to read. But as you can see, there's a $200,000 math error where the 5.2 million numbers in the red box, they show a total of 5.084 million. So, and then that $200,000 error goes right on down into their 5,249,000, which is the number that was on that earlier slide and shown on the front page of their bid. So it has a math error in it, but it has more than just a math error. And they weren't the only ones, and again, this is impossible. I really apologize. But, so we go through all the bids and look at the math, but also how they achieved, how they, their process for considering alternatives, the deductive alternates. The deductive alternate is, okay, we want to do this or that, but not both. So when you bid the deductive alternate, you need to take the other item out and add the other item in. Sheffield did not take the other item out, they just added the other cost in. The sum total of all of this is that when you make these corrections, and by the way, they weren't the only bidder to make that error, but when you fix all of those, Sheffield is not the low bidder. Advon, who sent you the letter, is the third highest bidder, and CSI is the lowest cost bidder. So I think in conclusion, I'd like you to know is the bid analysis was done correctly. Any differences between the numbers we're working with and what are actually in the bids is because the bids contained errors. They're called irregularities, and the invitation for bid clearly says we can correct irregularities and either accept them or reject them. The second thing is, I guess I'd want to say, is the city doesn't award just on lowest cost. Sometimes it does, but not always. We consider cost and award economic points for it, but we also consider MBE participation. The MBE office had not seen the math errors when they did their analysis, so they thought Sheffield was the low bidder, and they awarded them the full points for being the low bidder. They still don't get the highest point total due to having a much lower MBE participation. The upshot of that is they're not the low bidder, but if they were, they still wouldn't get the award. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to ask or answer them.
Any questions, commissioners? Seeing none.
Well, when do you expect to start this, and when do you expect it to be finished?
The construction process will take about a year, but it usually takes 6 weeks or so to get a construction contract and all the insurance and bonds secured.
Good. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, there is a motion and a second. If there are no other questions, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, we're now on to item 13.08, and actually, this is an item that I requested. At our last meeting, we were all reflecting on, obviously, the tragedy in Parkland and discussed what our own history had been with the Florida legislature around gun reform. At that time, the Florida legislature had not taken action to reform any of Florida law, and it has now since taken action. The city attorney, I believe, in her office did a great job sort of collecting, I think, having conversations with city attorneys around the state with regard to actions that local governments were taking, particularly as it relates to preemption law. And just to restate for everyone's purposes, right now, Section 790.33 of the Florida statutes prevent local governments from passing any gun regulation whatsoever. And it does something a little bit more than just carve out territory. It also permits elected officials to be sued in their individual capacities, which means decisions that we make as an elected body and our position as elected officials, which right now is we're indemnified from personal lawsuit. We can be personally sued, personally fined up to $5,000, personally responsible for the reimbursement of the attorney's fees of the opposing party up to $100,000, and subject to removal from office at the discretion of the governor. We tried to argue in a previous case that was brought against a number of us individually that law was unconstitutional. The courts, however, deciding that they could only determine in the most narrow sense of the law that they were not prepared to answer a constitutional question, that there was no constitutional question triggered. The city attorney has collected basically some responses that different municipalities have adopted. And I'm going to pass the gavel because what I'd like for this commission to consider, similar to many of our sister cities around the state, is a resolution directed toward our federal government and our state government, expressing our call for common sense gun reform, and also in that resolution express yet again an argument that we attempted to make legally, our disagreement with Florida statute section 790.33, and that we, at the appropriate time, and I think the attorney made this case to me, I think rather successfully, that it would make most sense, should we engage ourselves in legal action, that we wait until there is an appellate jurisdiction on the case that's right now being considered by a few of our other sister governments to join as amicus parties, just as many of these cities joined us as amicus parties during our lawsuit. So that would be my motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Commissioner.
I'll second that with just a couple of questions and suggestions. The first one is, if we could see whatever the language is for the resolution before.
Of course.
I'm assuming that'll come back.
This would be the instruct staff for a resolution.
Wholeheartedly support that. Regarding other cities and their litigation, I would certainly hope that we would, on a case-by-case basis, have once again that conversation before this commission before we would proceed. But once again, I support that effort as well.
Great. Thank you. There is a motion and a second. I'm sorry. You have the, I made the motion. You have the gavel.
All right. We do have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments?
Well, I'd like to know if the city attorney wants to add anything before we vote.
No, I think that probably is the most reasonable position to take in light of the current law. I reported to you that the city of Boca Raton, as well as the city of Gainesville, have passed resolutions that basically indicate they have asked their representatives that they actually consider reasonable gun control legislation. We have, as we said, we had others who supported us when we were on appeal to the First District Court of Appeals and provided a friend of the court briefs of amicus curiae briefs, and I would recommend that as well if that was the will of this commission.
Okay, thank you, Madam Attorney. Any other questions, comments?
One more, and I think this could be an ongoing conversation because the legislature now is not going to be back for quite some time, but they will start to have committee meetings. It was either the last week or the second to last week, Senator Tadeo from Miami-Dade introduced an amendment to the gun bill that would have removed the preemption. It was not passed. But interestingly enough, it actually got more votes than I thought it was going to get. I think what we should do also is work with our sister cities, with the Florida League of Cities, and anyone else that wants to join in with us, and really push legislation, next legislative session, to remove that preemption, because that preemption has got to go.
Okay.
The only, Mr. Chairman, if I could, the only other piece that I think that we've got to consider this on a case-by-case basis, or presuming that there is a suit around declaratory judgment that is able to be heard, is if other cities start to join in so that we share some of the burden of that responsibility, that the city attorney bring back that litigation as it moves forward and allows this commission to determine, aside from an amicus brief, how we might want to engage in fighting, again, what I believe is an unjust law.
Okay. And for clarification, do you mean at the appellate level?
Correct.
All right, so.
Senator Miller?
Thank you. So my understanding is that the resolution is going to come back to us. And my understanding also is that we can do this without threat of being sued ourselves again, correct?
That is correct.
And one of the main reasons that's important is that even though we may leave, the suit would still be there in front of the new commission. And I don't really think it's reasonable to have a new group of commissioners have to walk into a situation where they're actually in litigation about gun control. So I just am trying to avoid that.
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I know at some point, certainly if there is not a declaratory judgment on this, which I do hope that the courts were granted. I think, are they in the Fifth Circuit?
Fifth.
Or that would be the appellate.
Yes, District Court of Appeals.
Fifth District Court of Appeals. I do think at some level there will have to be actions that trigger an action from the courts. The reason why I feel comfortable with litigation in this case is because the litigation actually doesn't sit on the city, does it? I thought it follows the individual.
Well, and this, if it takes place in the Fifth District Court of Appeals, it's going to be the law for the Fifth District Court. We already have a case that we pursued that sort of says where the district court is on a case in controversy, and what they said is there's no case in controversy unless someone has tried to pass an ordinance, the city, or if they're actually subject to penalty because they did pass. They've really very finely defined what they consider to be a case in controversy.
Again, and I think we can add this in our own, should we get to this place, but the fact that none of us could be represented by the city's counsel, legal counsel, is already a triggering of the preemption law. The law says the reason why Llewellyn, under his capacity as a city attorney, could not be counsel to us individually was because the law prevented it. That's correct. Which then made us subject to find our own legal counsel. And I just think that, you know, again, at the appropriate time that has to be borne out, because the law was triggered. There was a consequence of the law, and the first being that we were personally sued, the second being that we had to find personal representation. Again, that's not germane necessarily to this, but it is.
But the discussion is important.
Absolutely.
We need to air the discussion. Any other?
Well, and the third thing that really needs to be repeated is that we were sued for taking no action. Which is the reason why it was dismissed, but we basically tabled a discussion on whether we should remove an ordinance from the books about guns in parks that had been on the books for decades, and then we tabled it waiting to hear from others court cases, and lo and behold, here came the suit. So
sure. And Mr. Chairman, that I think that again, that is to the point of the chilling effect. So if we tabled it and refused by tabling to repeal from our ordinance, and the ordinance is still in our books, wouldn't it have been reasonable for a court to just dismiss the suit against us outright? And that's the point, that the law allowed for that suit not to be dismissed outright, that for 2 years, we had to endure litigation on that purpose, and including the previous mayor, who no longer sat on this dais, was still named as an individual in that lawsuit. And so regardless how the ludicrosity of it, I don't know if that's a word, but we were still, in the eyes of the court, in that process for 2 years for what little action was taken.
Okay. All right. Madam Attorney, do you have the direction that you need to bring?
We have to vote.
Oh, we do need to vote? Okay. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Commissioners, we're now on to item 13.09. Mr. City Attorney. I'm sorry, Mr. City Manager.
I'll handle this one, Mr. Mayor. This item involves the purchase of a townhome on Park Avenue. In your September meeting, September 13th meeting, you directed us to pursue this, and we've reached an arrangement with the owner and are recommending your approval.
Second.
Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Commissioner Richardson.
I wanted to thank the city manager and his staff for their sensitivity to one of the tenants that lived in this apartment building. She is a part-time city employee, was looking for alternate living arrangements, was not able to find anything that she could afford in terms of the move-in cost. And the manager worked with her so that she had the time to be able to make alternate living arrangements. And I just wanted to thank him for that, because that speaks volumes to how we look out for the citizens of this community. And she really deeply appreciated it. So thank you, Mr. Manager, and your staff.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Commissioners, there's a motion and a second to approve the item. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, we're not going to take a break because we are 1 minute, 2 minutes away from, not going to take a dinner break, but if we will take 2 minutes in case folks have to refresh themselves. With our public hearing, Madam City Attorney.
Item number 15.01 is the first and only public hearing on ordinance number 18-0-09, an ordinance of the City of Tallahassee, Florida, amending Section 6 of the Charter of the City of Tallahassee to annex within the corporate area of the City of Tallahassee, Florida. Upon adoption of said ordinance, property being situated in Leon County, Florida, in accordance with the voluntary annexation provisions of Section 171.044 Florida statutes, providing for severability, conflicts, and an effective date.
Move the item, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, item 15.01. If there are no questions, all those in favor, let it be known by saying, I'm sorry, no speakers, correct?
No speakers.
Great. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. 15.02.
Item number 15.02 is the second and final public hearing on ordinance number 18-Z-04, an ordinance of the City of Tallahassee, Florida, designating and including additional territory as and in government operational -1 G0-1 on the official zoning map of the City of Tallahassee, adopted and established by the City Commission, providing for conflict, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Move the item, Mr. Mayor.
No speakers. There's a motion and a second to approve the item. All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. We are now at the section of the meeting of unagended speakers. There are forms in the very, very back of the room for any persons wishing to address the commission on unagended business. We have 3 minutes dedicated for each speaker. I believe you got a couple dozen or so, or maybe a dozen or so. And so, Treasurer Clerk, if we can go ahead.
Okay. The first speaker, Mayor, is Joe West, be followed by Erwin Jackson. I'll remind speakers, if you would, to give your name and address for the record. There will be a light right in front of you as you speak into the microphone that's green and will eventually turn yellow and red to signify that 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Joe West. I live on Dufton Loop here in Tallahassee. Last week's extremely fast demolition of historic buildings and 100-plus-year-old oak trees was somewhat reminiscent of the Baltimore Colts franchise exit in the middle of the night. Not illegal, but it certainly raised some eyebrows about how proud the owners were of their actions. A big difference would be they actually own that franchise. To give permits to a contractor prior to officially closing on a property seems somewhat at odds with everything most of us know about property transactions. The trees, that bothered me a lot that the trees were taken down. When Vietnam Veterans of America had a tree breaking up our sidewalk and driveway, we had to go through a process and get I think it was an $800 permit to remove that tree. I guess some trees are more important than others. Another question that I've got is who paid for that demolition project? I've heard tale that the city was paying for it, and if that's the case, I would wonder why would the developer not be the one paying for the removal of that property? Also, I'm kind of concerned about a 35-minute notice given to the concerned parties about demolition about to begin. As I understand it, they were notified by email at 6:25 a.m. on Wednesday morning that demolition was starting at 7. Doesn't seem like much of a time to give somebody to ponder a pretty good decision like that. Some of us are skeptical about the Community Redevelopment Agency and things that have happened. And I was under the impression that that agency had decided to hold back on projects till some of the questions about them were cleared up. Evidently, this one didn't follow under that qualification. It just bothers me the way that happened. And it seemed to happen awful quick, and a lot of people were really caught by surprise. I was one of them. I didn't know what was going on. That's not unusual. I don't know what's going on most of the time, but it just didn't seem to set well that fence went up and the blanket around it went so nobody could see what was going on. And some beautiful old trees are gone, and the statement I heard was, well, we're going to plant new ones. I'm just curious where you're going to get a 150-year-old tree to transplant. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Erwin Jackson, and then Harry Brown.
I'm feeling this is going to be my night.
Do you have somebody to help with the big screen? You've relocated all this? Pardon? We don't have that overhead. Oh, is it planning on getting it moved? Well, as a just a point of order here, I've got information to present, and the public's not able to present information.
Mr. Jackson,
Mr.
Jackson, if you would like, we can rotate your 3 minutes. If you want to give your documents to a city employee, if it's a reasonable size, we can get it printed and distributed to the commission.
No, I want it on the TV. We have more people sitting at home watching this presentation than the few people we have here.
Okay.
This is just another attempt at trying to silence me and silence the truth from the public.
Okay. So
how do we do that? Do we have?
We can begin your 3 minutes now.
When are we going to get access to show this information to the public?
Okay, we'll go ahead and start
this commission. Do we have any support of
Mr. Jackson, I just want you to be informed, and I'll stop talking, but your 3 minutes have begun.
Do what?
Your 3 minutes have started.
Oh, is that a no? Okay, I'm going to accept that as a no there, Mr. Mayor, and a no from every commissioner up here. Thank you very much. The biggest problem in Tallahassee is not gun control. The biggest problem is to stop the corruption in City Hall. It's interesting, a couple of weeks ago we had Curtis Richardson sit up there in the front. He said, we've got to do something. We have citizens coming up here and giving us information, giving us stuff, and we've just got to keep them away from us when we're sitting up here on our throne. I mean dais, but you got the gist of it. The mayor says, which was an insult to every veteran, he's nervous. He's afraid of me giving information to this group because it makes him feel like he's in harm's way. Mr. Mayor, I don't think you've ever been in harm's way unless you've been a veteran or if you've been a police officer. You have no understanding of harm's way. Let's look at the kind of information that, in fact, we do have, that I've been giving out. First and foremost, a few weeks ago, I came up here and I showed a newspaper article, and we put it on the screen. It says Scott Maddox scheme. Yep. Well, if you look at the picture, it's pretty scary, so I can understand your concern. I also went ahead and gave you a document to each of you. Right here it is. It outlines Mr. Fernandez and how he used city employees to remodel his own property. Yeah, you don't want that information. You don't want the public to see this. That's a problem. I can see that'd scare you. I came up here a few weeks ago. I gave each of you, I didn't throw paper at you, Mr. Mayor. Those was $5,000 I gave each $1,000 apiece. I didn't throw them at you. And if 5,000 $5 bills hit you in the head, you probably wouldn't get hurt. The other thing, and most scary, was I gave each of you a Government in the Sunshine manual. The manual says in here that I'm to have the right to speak. It says in here that I have the right to share information, not only on the screen, but on television. And I think the city attorney needs to look into this. Well, you were frightened of this manual, and I think you will be before we get through with this. Tonight, though.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Your time has expired, sir.
Because I have brought with you, now who do I give my present to? My information.
The law enforcement officials in the back of the room.
If there's a law enforcement official, please come up here and help me. I don't want you to get real scared.
Mr. Jackson, your time has expired.
I'm looking for a
the next
police
speaker.
official.
Next speaker is Harry Brown.
Mr. Brown.
Boxes of Girl Scout cookies.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
From the Troop 88. And I don't want anyone to get nervous. It's not a bond.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Be careful.
Can we get the next speaker, please?
Can we just, the five of us agree that just four of us agree to donate this to somebody?
We should donate them back to the Girl Scouts now that they got the money. Can we get the next speaker, please?
Yes, Mayor. The next speaker is Harry Brown. He'll be followed by Lonnie Mann.
Back to him.
Mr. Mayor, I have a suggestion.
Yes, sir.
Since it's going to, we have a lot of speakers, whoever the last speaker is, because I know they're going to wait a long time, let's give them those cookies. Whoever the last speaker is.
Last 5 speakers.
Or the last 5 speakers.
The last 5 speakers
Get
get
the
a box of cookies.
Mr. Brown, your time has begun.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is my Bible, and I'm here to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. My name is Harry Brown. I live at 5431 Crump Road, Tallahassee, Florida. A couple weeks ago, I was at Sam's gas pumps, and as I drove to one side of the gas pump, Mr. Scott Maddox was on the other side, on his phone while he's pumping gas. That's not a very smart man, is he? Our 5-year-olds would tell us you shouldn't pump gas while you're on your cell phone. But that's the kind of man he is. Scott disparages employees, and he has not disparaged anybody any more than he has disparaged me. Scott is allowed to wear a gun at the dais. Has any one of you ever addressed that? Have you? Why are you so mum now, Mr. Mayor?
Sir, I want to give you your time.
Okay, good. Just let me know. Okay? And I want to ask you, when did the city of Tallahassee become so great? We could see at the last commission meeting it was not so great. We could see at the time you handled Mrs. Jackson's hiring, it was not so great. And we have seen many occasions where the city of Tallahassee is not so great. I and others have been treated with utmost disrespect and in an unflattering manner. Has anyone noticed that since I've been bringing my Bible to the podium, Scott Maddox has not called me a lie since? At least he got sense enough to respect God's word. And that's the only thing I've ever admired him for. But I tell you people, if you all gonna have a great city, again, if you ever had one, you're not gonna have it with Scott Maddox. You tried to get him out of here, he doesn't wanna go. He's trying to save face. But Scott Maddox is no good for this city. And as long as you keep him here, it lets everybody in this city know that you are the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Lonnie Mann, and then Glenn Doran.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you
My name is Lonnie Mann. I live at 1120 East Windwood Way in Tallahassee. And I'm here representing Panhandle Archaeological Society at Tallahassee. And my remarks are preparatory to later remarks to be made by Dr. Glenn Doran. As Florida's capital, Tallahassee has a special place in the history of the state. Our history is not all written down. It's under our feet. Last year, an alert backhoe operator stripping asphalt in the Veterans Lot saw some rather large-looking bricks full of clinkers. He called Bureau of Archaeological Research. It was on state property. Archaeological excavations the next day revealed that the deposits were from Washington Hall, a hotel and tavern constructed between 1825 and 1828. During the early territorial period, it served as a place for legislative meetings. It was where the Great Fire of Tallahassee of 1843 started. For a variety of reasons, we believe there may be archaeological resources on the Bloxham Annex property. That property is extremely prominent in Florida history. City Code recognizes the importance of cultural resources in considering development applications. We ask you to please be mindful of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Next is Glenn Doran, followed by Randall Denker.
I'm Glenn Doran, live at 1117 Azalea Drive. I'm an archaeologist with about 50 years worth of experience, the last 38 in Florida. And one of the things I'd like to point out is all of the development projects you're talking about, whether it's waterworks, the Bloxham area, the Washington proposal area, and certainly the Cascades Park area, have really not been examined from an archaeological standpoint. If you look at a topo map, it's a ridge of land that is above the lowland area, and we know that there are additional prehistoric sites scattered along the uplands overlooking those lowland areas. So any kind of development in any of those areas should first, consider archaeological resources. We know there's prehistoric materials scattered around. Lonnie has put together some information that he distributed to you yesterday about some of the known historic possibilities in those areas. Prior to the state buildings, it was a series of smaller structures, residential structures that were probably sitting on top of some of the very earliest occupations in Tallahassee by Butler and some of the early developers in that area. And at least in the case of the Cascades area, it's actually been protected by the parking lot for the last 40 or so years. And Lonnie mentions that just because there's a parking lot there or a building that's been removed doesn't mean that it's been completely disturbed. In fact, much of the development of Tallahassee from the 1880s on up into the 50s, when you did development, you just sort of scraped the surface off, got rid of the vegetation, and then put piers and pilings in and built on top of that. So there's a pretty good likelihood that there would be materials in the ground, but you have to look for it. And I don't believe that this has been done on any of these projects. And it's either the CRA responsibility or city responsibility or county responsibility to really take a more caring look, let's say, of prehistoric and historic archaeological resources than seems to be happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Randall Denker, and then Jan DeCosmo.
Good evening. My name is Randall Denker. I live at 552 East Georgia Street, and I'm here tonight, as I think are an awful lot of people. I would actually ask people here who are here concerned about the Cascades Development Project stand up so you can see, because I don't think everyone's going to speak. I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned about the use of public money. I'm concerned about the notice that was given. I'm concerned about the tax relief. This project apparently has been moving along for some time, but it was not well known to the surrounding neighbors what exactly the extent of it would be and how much tree removal would be involved. I sit on the board as a member of the Lafayette Park Neighborhood Association, and I can tell you that our board did not know. We found ourselves surprised by the scope of this project, and we wish that it had been better advertised at the beginning of the concept, and that neighborhood associations like ours, where our members utilize the park a great deal, had been actively solicited. We believe there is a need for more amenities in downtown, and we welcome them, but this is not the type of project that we believe will improve Cascade Park nor our quality of life. And I understand the justification for this project, and I just want to say I don't know what legally can be done at this point because y'all have signed contracts, but if anything can be done to slow this down or scale this back a little, especially the high-rise aspects of it, that would go a long way, I think, towards resolving some of the concerns people have here. But if nothing can be done, I would like to address my remarks to what could be done in the future to be more inclusive, to provide more notice. Such things, for instance, well, I'll try to sum it up at the end of my talk, what I think can be done in the future. I understand the justification of this is to create a more vibrant downtown and more nightlife. But first of all, Cascade Park is not exactly downtown. It is a significant distance from the core of downtown, and it is adjacent to a lot of residential neighborhoods with mostly single-family homes. So if it's successful, I believe it'll have the effect of actually shifting or siphoning off business from our downtown. And if it may actually hurt actual downtown businesses. And if it's not successful, then we're going to end up with some empty storefronts and urban blight. I would point out we already have a successful model for developing an active all-night Tallahassee, and that model is Midtown. Look at what's happened in Midtown over the last decade. It has organically evolved into a diverse collection of unique shops, eateries, breweries, entertainment. And we have that there because it has been a slow evolution of local grassroots businesses developing one at a time, instead of a wholesale raising of everything and trying to supplant it with a gigantic South Florida-style architectural overlay, which is what we have at Cascade Park now.
Excuse me, that's 3 minutes.
Oh, my God.
Ms. Dinker, I know you mentioned having a couple of recommendations.
Can I just skip to my conclusions?
If you could, yeah.
Okay, I can sum those up quickly. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was taking so much time. If it's legally possible, and I'm an attorney, I don't know if it is myself, eliminate the condos, or at least the scale of those, to scale it back to 3 stories instead of 6 stories. And in the future, when a big project, a major project like this is being contemplated, would it be possible to post a large sign on the site at the earliest possible time that would say a website and a phone number, and to say, you know, call this is what's coming? Also, in the future, it would be wonderful if neighborhood associations like mine got specific notice, and if we could have charrettes that would actively invite people to come and give their input. And finally, I want to say I would love, as would everyone in this room, I think, to see a change in the city ordinance that allows the wholesale destruction of our, quote, protected trees in exchange for donating money to a tree bank or planting some sticks. I think that time has come to look into changing the ordinance because we don't really have a tree protection ordinance at the moment.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Next speaker, Jan DeCosmo, and then Kim Ross.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. I live at 2205 Jim Lee Road, Jan DeCosmo. For 37 years now, I've taught at Florida A&M University, but I'm here tonight representing a group that we formed on Facebook, Save the Firestone and the Cascades Oak Grove. As you know, we have failed. So technically we are in mourning. We have lost heritage oaks, these majestic oaks that are the reason people love Tallahassee and want to move here. One of our group members sitting in the back over there told me she moved to Tallahassee because of the trees. And she could not believe that we were going to cut down acres of heritage oaks just overnight. It happened so quickly. And yes, the project's been in the works a while, but I guess it really just didn't hit us that that whole property of 3 or 5 acres or however large it is was just going to be leveled. In losing the Firestone building, we are losing so much of our civil rights history. And when I travel the world, and I've been to about 30 countries, I go to the historical centers. I look for the oldest buildings. I look for, you know, the sites that show the history and the character and the quality of the place. And you guys, it is just tragic that we're destroying our history in our old historic buildings, some of which have been placed on the historic register. We missed a great opportunity here, and I'm just sad that we didn't have the money to try to figure out how to build a civil rights museum on that spot. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about, a member of our group, and we have about 780 members, and boy, can we talk on Facebook, I tell you. We're just talking up and down and up and down. So I don't know what good it's going to do, but hopefully in the future we can save what's left of our heritage oaks and our historic buildings. One of our members did some research into the demolition permit, the application from the city. She wrote that it was only filed in mid-February. It incorrectly identified as other the type of trees to be removed, although one of the choices was patriarch trees. They did not check that off. It was processed and approved by the CRA, and whoever at the city signed off in less than 3 weeks. Demolition started the day after approvals. So to tell us we knew all this time that all these trees would be destroyed, we really did not. And I wish we had known sooner. So it was rushed through with no transparency. We just really need to save the character of our city. I've lived here 67 years. It's in the trees and the historic buildings and our history. That's why people travel to go places, to learn about history and culture, and, you know, not to see some, what I call monotonous modern architecture.
Excuse me, your 3 minutes have expired. Thank you, Ms. Coswell. Kim Ross, then Ramona Abernathy Payne.
Hi, Kim Ross again, 1203 Buckingham Drive. So now I do want to address the Cascades Grove project, Firestone project, and also some of the comments that you made earlier. Earlier you said that North American Properties is an awesome partner and has listened to the community. And it is possible that they listened to the partners that you pointed them to, the Chamber, the CRA, the CRA itself, the Tallahassee Historic Preservation Partner. But I am here when I could be plenty of other places. And I'm here as a person who has her ear to the ground in the grassroots on environmental issues to tell you either your process is bad or the partner is tone deaf about to the many, many people in the community that care about our community maintaining its patriarch oaks. They might have been good at listening to the people who fought for the preservation of the buildings, although from what I am hearing that was minimal. But there was very, very, very little effort to communicate with a part of the community that loves trees. What does appear to be the case is that as this project got closer and closer, more and more trees were slated for knocking down. To be honest, I don't entirely blame the developer. A developer is going to develop. But how did we get to the point where so many leaders in the environmental community were actually surprised that 18 large trees were coming down? I go back to the tree ordinance that I discussed earlier that has a pay-to-play connotation. It becomes a business decision for our developers. Is it worth the money to knock a patriarch live oak down? If you shift the use of that ordinance back to being able to say no, then we end up protected. So I blame the process, especially the use of that tree ordinance, and I am personally disappointed that I could not count on this commission to protect our trees, and I would like an explanation. And I want the use of that tree ordinance fixed. You can't save the beautiful oaks that have already come down. But although I'm disappointed that you didn't do anything about the Waterworks property, you can fix this for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Ramona Abernathy Payne, and then Ann Bidlingmeyer.
My name is Ramona Abernathy Payne. I live at 2006 East Indian Head Drive. Thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. In a meeting last year, Commissioner Ziffer was talking about the city's attempt to brand itself and said our brand should be, "We're not Nashville." I second that thought by saying, we're not Orlando either. I came to Tallahassee from Orlando over 40 years ago. I was instantly charmed by the beautiful surroundings, trees, flowers, wild places. All these had been lost in Orlando in the years I lived there. Once Disney came in, everything was paved over and plasticized. We even called it Disneyizing. Tallahassee felt real to me, a place that became home. I quickly came to appreciate Tallahassee's wisdom in planning for protecting the trees of the town and the other treasures, trees, architecture, local businesses. These are all being replaced by pavement, industrial-looking buildings, and national chains and franchises. Tallahassee may not be turning into Nashville, but is sure turning into Orlando. Please direct the staff to enforce the tree ordinance, direct staff to enforce sign ordinance, and direct staff to stop giving variances to codes to anyone who asks. Keep Tallahassee the welcoming, charming, engaging place that has brought so many people here to a place that we call home. We're not Orlando.
Thank you. Ann Bidlingmeyer, and then Rip Colleen.
Hi, my name is Ann Bidlingmeyer, 1920 Harriet Drive, Tallahassee. Well, a couple of years ago, when I took a tour of Myers Park public area slated for urban townhomes and condos, I heard a discussion about condos and townhouses adjacent to Cascades Park, even though no public notice was given, and that is a huge problem, lack of public notice. I recently saw a piece in the paper about the project, so I got some paperwork from Growth Management and took a realtor friend to see if we could pinpoint the exact location. It took us a while because the paperwork was very vague. When we finally found where the project was proposed, we were aghast at the heritage oak grove and 45-foot hill that would be decimated. To alert the public as to the short-sighted and thoughtless plan, I led tours of that oak grove. Reaction was the same across the board, dismay and shock. Demolition permits were vaguely scheduled to begin in February and progress through the summer. Coincidentally, and I'm sure it was just a coincidence, after I guided a dozen or more tours, the CRA ramped up the demo permits. The developer does not yet own the property. And an opaque fence, something seldom done. It's done around the Capitol and one place on Thomasville Road, but it's really expensive. An opaque fence, something seldom done, was put up, 2 of them, in fact. Despite the fact that we garnered 1,200 petition signatures urging the city to include the hill and grove as part of the project, the CRA and the city betrayed public trust by clearing early and unexpectedly. In my 40 years here, never have I seen anything so underhanded performed by the city. The Chamber and the city are counting on the claim that this project will create hundreds of jobs and pump $350 million into the economy. What if they are totally wrong? Common sense and economic research suggests not just that their numbers are off, but they are way off. As we learned from College Town, we are not filling demand for growing a market, just shifting the market from one place to another. The failure of the Cascade Arena to be a revenue producer is not comforting support for the scope of this project, and I mean scope. Nor is the distressing situation with the Tallahassee Center, although it was a much more imaginative and thought through and didn't result in environmental havoc. We could have designed a project that would have saved the beautiful trees on the hill. We have many talented architects, urban planners, engineers, landscape architects, and arborists. Development that does preserve our charm should always be encouraged. The reckless destruction of public assets to accommodate private profit-driven ventures using public dollars is a stunning act of irresponsibility, and if there were a market for this project, we would not have to subsidize it. This is the wrong place. This is the wrong place for the wrong development. And I have to say, the reason patriarch trees were not checked off on the permit is that the city has an antiquated definition of patriarch trees. It has not been in place for 20 years.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Rip Colleen. He'll be followed by Darwin Campbell.
Rip Colleen, 3048 Godfrey Place, Tallahassee. I won't repeat what you've all heard or summarize it, but this is about the trees on that hill that were there last week and are now gone. And I've got pictures of the before and after, which the first one, there's just two pictures here. The first one was taken by a Tallahassee Democrat, Hallie Tokes. So that's what was on the top of that hill, right across from the Cascades Park. Can you see that? Oh, okay, I got it as large as I could. That's her photograph. You can see canopy, large oaks, the huge oak close up with the huge burls that had grown around the trunk. They're gone. This is gone. Now I want to show you. This was taken yesterday. That's what you see there now. I went up and took this picture. So that's gone. So you can see it. You don't just have to hear people talk. This was a beautiful canopied grove on the top of a hill, right across from Cascades, looking at it from the left of the Edison. And it's gone. And it's because this Capital Redevelopment Agency, on which you all sit, let this happen. You didn't have to. You were the owner of this property. You had such power and control over all of that property. This was an example where you're not limited by your regulations. You're selling city property. And you could have controlled this. You could have avoided this. You could have sent this back to the developer when you saw what he was going to do and say, back to the drawing board. Come back and avoid doing this. And it wasn't done. So in the future, please go walk it, see what's there, and don't let this happen again.
Thank you.
Next speaker. Darwin Campbell is the next speaker, Mayor, and then Linda Miklowitz.
Good evening again. Darwin Campbell, 1248 Halifax Court. Chapter 163 of the Florida Statutes tells us the purpose of a community redevelopment agency, also known as a CRA. That purpose is to eliminate slums and blight. And then the statute goes on to define slums and blight. You won't find trees in either one of those definitions. You won't find historic buildings in either one of those definitions. The Cascades Project is an example of what I've been calling Mission Creep Run Amok. It has nothing to do with the purpose of a CRA. And as you've heard, it's a development the community does not want or need. Now, I thought Randall Dinker had some great solutions. But in the meantime, you can do a couple of other things. You can stop what's left of the demolition. It's not just the buildings and trees. I understand a big part of that hill is coming down. The second thing you can do is simply not approve the rezoning to planned unit development when it comes before you. That way the sale won't go through to the developer and you can start all over. I think if you really care about this community and the people who live here, that's what you'll do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Linda Miklowitz. She will be followed by, well, I have a number of speakers who are going to waive their time, so I'll name them when the opportunity comes. You may go ahead and begin.
Thank you. It seems futile to come to you now. After the fact, a historically significant and architecturally significant classical Art Deco building from 1937 is in rubble. And some dozen and a half patriarchal oaks of 50 inches in diameter or more, which were probably here since the Civil War and so much other Florida history, now dismembered. We entrusted you all, to use good judgment when we elected you, not to give away our treasures to the first developer. You seem to have been more seduced by money rather than history and beauty. The Firestone building, once the city jail, no longer can be a civil rights museum. It could have even been an income generator as a mini mall with eateries, shops, offices, and studios. Look how Gainesville converted the old Gainesville Sun building into a mini mall and the neoclassical Greek revival old post office next door to a regional theater. Look at the torpedo factory in Old Town Alexandria on the coast of the Potomac River. All this could have been done, but you all didn't let it happen. You owe us an apology. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Mayor, we have a number of speakers who filled out forms for the record who were opposed to the project as others have described. Those names are Cindy Miller, Marcia Hosark, John Lorenz, Del Cates, and Dot Skofronic. But the next who filled out a form and wishes to speak is Catherine Mears, followed by Barbara Doran.
Catherine Mears, 5243 Trout Trail. Ooh, who knew this would be this hard? Honorable Commissioners, these people, they don't have proper refinement. Hence the cacophony and the rancor directed at you and at NAP, fine cultivated public servants. To be sure, there are tree huggers in my family. I consider them traitors to my cause. I take tours of their Florida-friendly yards, and it leaves me with just a gnawing sense of ennui. So I don't relate to a lot of this. Now, while my family, they get all a quiver at the sight of the nesting birds feeding their hungry nestlings, nasty, messy little creatures, I take umbrage with their constant flitting and chirping. It's not music to my ears. Quite detestable indeed, as is the chitter of squirrels. Not that I have anything against animals. I just do not want to share my living and recreation space with them. I congratulate the board for a project design that alleviates my concerns. It'll be well worth living there. Everything clean, shiny, and new. While long enamored of gated communities that insist on certain standards and appearances, if you know what I mean, this project appears to take proper measures to discourage the ubiquitous less fortunate and their vapid offspring. Paid parking spaces, special events, $20, that helps. Good thinking. Also, toward that end, it was wise and not capricious at all to rid us of those large trees, thus eliminating the passe shaded areas that would have lured street performers and encouraged, no doubt, the reprehensible mimes. Heaven forbid the mimes and jugglers. If you faced them, you know what I mean. Not that I have anything against those genres. It's just a boondoggle. I personally prefer the mellifluous sound of traffic and revelers unimpeded by trees and shrubbery to echo endlessly between buildings and across open space. It's a conundrum. How to entice the right sort of culture while deterring the less franchised elements of society, while sidestepping a political quagmire. Not that I don't have empathy for those elements. It's all just flummoxes me. I can say in all sincerity, bravo, my dears, with your enterprise. God accompli. Now, to conclude, for myself, culture society, to have this gem of a vogue housing for prominent living, I'm all for it. Now, in closing, pray for the dead oaks. Fight like hell for the living. Thank you.
Next speaker is Barbara Doran,
And then Brian Lupiani.
Thank you. I'm Barbara Doran. I live at 1117 Azalea Drive. I'm addressing this to the current Tallahassee City Commissioners, Mayor, City Planning Department, CRA, Chamber of Commerce, and all who promoted, approved, and or touched the Cascades project in some way. That includes at least NAP, Taproot, KCCI, and all the players who have been involved in the planning, promotion, and approval and execution of this project. When I moved to Tallahassee in 1980, 38 years ago, I wrote home telling my family and friends about Tallahassee, how there were so many trees, beautiful trees. It felt like a forest. In fact, it was a city proud of its trees and had ordinances that protected them. The canopy rose, and the city believed in the historic preservation, such as the Capitol, which in a few weeks I think they're celebrating the 40th anniversary of the preservation of the old Capitol. Fast forward to about a month ago, rumor was a grove of healthy historic trees were slated to be destroyed. I took a tour of the parcel. We started from Cascades Park, which has no really significant trees, a few turquoise umbrellas, but no trees. And it was a warm afternoon. As soon as we walked under those trees, it was cooler. We were dwarfed by the majestic oaks. Long strands of Spanish moss waved in the wind. I stood there and I remembered when my mother-in-law, who suffered from dementia, I'm sorry, it's just, I'm grieving, who suffered from dementia, moved in with us. She was from West Texas. Anytime we drove by a tree with Spanish moss, she'd ask, "What is it? And what's it called? And is it from Spain? Does it hurt the tree?" We answered those questions over and over because Tallahassee was covered with majestic oaks, covered with Spanish moss. I took my husband to the site. Excuse me, gotta be able to read. I took my husband to the site, and he was astonished that the trees weren't protected, as have been so many Tallahassee residents who didn't realize these trees, or trees like those, are not protected anymore. There used to be a 30-inch cutting measurement to a tree, and it was a city ordinance, and it's gone. It's been changed. So many people are shocked to hear that. And when and how and why did that happen? We started collecting signatures on a petition on behalf of the trees. Something was amiss. This just couldn't be true. My husband and I went on a short trip to Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, all along the coastal roads. There were hundreds of majestic oak trees. I'm sorry, I see the red light. Can I just finish?
Yes.
Is that okay? We went on a short trip to those states. The oaks that were still standing after the hurricanes. The houses were gone, but the oaks were still there. And I truly realized that Tallahassee is destroying what is so essential to the beauty and charm of cities all across the Gulf Coast and the southeastern coastlines. I learned today, and I won't repeat it, about the apparent, very quick and recent approval to remove those trees that weren't marked as patriarch. And someone said to me one day, "Well, you should have been involved in this 2 years ago." And like others have said, I didn't have any idea those trees were there, and part of this project was that. And so I knew of the project 2 years ago, but no, not the demolition of those trees. It was rushed through with no transparency. I'm convinced that you will be remembered for the wrong project in the wrong place, be remembered for the destruction of an extraordinary grove of heritage patriarch trees, remembered for the lack of transparency regarding these trees and this project, remembered for your lack of consideration of things that city and citizens of Tallahassee truly care about. Thank you for letting me finish. my hope is we can restore protections for those big trees that are all along the coastlines of the United States. And Tallahassee just destroyed a grove, a small grove of them, right in downtown. It's such a travesty. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker is Brian Lupiani, and then Delatry Hollinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Brian Lupiani at 607 McDaniel Street in the city limits. And I plead guilty to being less than as active a citizen and involved citizen as I should have been. I thought I was real clever a year or so ago when that ridiculous plan was floated to drop a few thousand people and vehicles on the edge of Myers Park and overlooking Cascades. I knew at the time, or I felt at the time, that was just sort of a bait and switch to put that out there to be rejected by the surrounding neighborhoods so that this other thing could go through. And then I really didn't pay much attention to the other thing until it was too late. I agree with what everyone has said about the destruction of the trees and the buildings, but I feel that deeply too. But I've always been more of a process guy. I've been a longtime member of Common Cause, which, like the League of Women Voters, kind of looks at the operations of things as much as the issues. And I'm just, as someone had said earlier, I'm just stunned at this underhanded, secretive process that was done at the end to knock all that stuff down with barely any notice to anyone. And, you know, I understand the city's desire to have more taxable property and to woo this wonderful creative class that's supposed to be out there and everybody coming up with the next great app. I really don't see how this thing is going to appeal to them anyway. But so having this project is not that big of a surprise, but I've never seen this city do anything like this. And to just basically, as I guess was Mr. West said, be like the Irvings and the Baltimore Colts just coming in the middle of the night and stealing out of town. It's just kind of the same thing. And then what was really great is a day or two after that's done, this article's in the paper. City seeks feedback for urban forest plan. Oh, wow. Yeah, I believe that. Here's one thing. Just don't do this sort of stuff again. Now, I've never been the kind to get up here and threaten people with losing elections and stuff like that. And in this case, it'd be ridiculous because the three of you aren't going to be here at the end of the year anyway. But I really implore you to do the right thing. First of all, find the person or have the person fess up who really ultimately signed off on this near midnight destruction. And ideally, that person should get suspended. I don't think they should get fired over it, but they should get suspended. I know that's not going to happen, but that person should at least fess up, apologize to this community for what happened to our property, not NAPs or your property, the community's property, and set things up so it never happens again. Now,
excuse me, that's 3 minutes.
All right, I just want to say one more thing. This community waited decades for a Cascades Park to be done, and it's a beautiful gem. It's basically, realistically, it's a retention pond, but it's a wonderful park. And we haven't even been able to have it for 5 years before the view gets blocked off. We're selling the overlook of the park to the highest bidder for probably a bunch of lobbyists and legislators that are going to buy these condos. If anybody buys them, going to buy these condos. They're going to sit empty most of the year, and all they're going to do is reflect the sun back on this treeless area. And it's just very bothersome. Also, I didn't realize until recently, and thank you very much, I know I'm way over time, when I looked closely at the plans, I realized that the kids' fountain is going to be gone. And that's one thing that, even though there hasn't been much of a selection of music, a lot of times the water jets or the lights aren't working. But that's been something that's been something that draws people from throughout the community.
True.
Well, it says fountain, and it just looks like any old fountain.
Not going to be gone.
If they keep that, that's great, but I'd be very surprised if they do.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Mayor, the next speaker is Delatry Hollinger, and that's the last speaker for whom I have a form.
Delatry Hollinger, 501 Alpha Avenue. I'm at the termination of something I began in December of 2013. I have fought for the preservation of the Firestone building for 4.5 years. So, and that includes going to CRE meetings. That includes coming here to speak before you, before Mayor Marks was out of office. I'm not at all angry. Just disappointed, and even more than disappointed, just hurt that we weren't able to save such a significant piece of civil rights history on a national scale for 4.5 years. I told the historical accuracy that John G. Riley, who at that time was the president of the NAACP in Tallahassee, wrote a letter to Walter White in 1937 following the kidnapping and lynching of 2 black youth who were kidnapped from the old jail, and as a result of getting the national president of the NAACP involved, that lynching that happened from the Llewellyn County Jail was the catalyst for the United States Congress passing the first piece of anti-lynching legislation in the entire country as a result of what happened in Tallahassee. And that lynching was publicized throughout the nation, caught the attention of Coach Jake Gaither, who had just been hired to be assistant football coach at Florida A&M University. He called President J.R.E. Lee and asked him if it was safe for he and his wife, Sadie Gaither, to move to Tallahassee because of the lynching that had just occurred. President Lee assured Coach Gaither that it would be okay for him and his wife to move here. In 1960, the first civil rights jail in the entire country happened at the old Llewellyn County Jail when Patricia Stevens Dew and Priscilla Stevens Krause led a jail in of FAMU and FSU students. It was the first in the country. And I've been saying that for 4.5 years. But I do have to, but I didn't come to yell at anyone. I actually came to thank Mayor Gillum because throughout the process, you actually suggested that we have a state civil rights museum in Tallahassee. Commissioner Miller, at one of the CRA meetings when I brought a proposal before you, you said, let's explore this civil rights museum. Commissioner Ziffer, you said on more than one occasion, let's try to pick the building up and move it. Let's do something with it. So I have to thank you for that. But it's just unfortunate what has happened. It's unfortunate that we didn't get notice, those of us who served on the Community Historical User Group, until the morning of that the demolition had started. And unfortunate that we didn't know about the destruction of the Oak Grove until recently. But thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
No further speakers.
There are no further speakers on this item. I just want to thank everyone who came out and expressed their thoughts, I think, very, very respectfully and very eloquently. And I understand a lot of the emotions associated with this. I drive by this location every day on the way to work and on the way back, given where my office is outside of City Hall. I will say the descriptions of sort of in the dead of night and no one being aware, my involvement in this project goes back probably nearly 5 years when we negotiated the exchange of this site with Florida State University. And in that period of time, there has been pretty regular coverage and regular meetings about the proposals for that location, the plans for it, an RFP put out on the street for any concepts whatsoever to come back to the commission for a decision. And that was all done very much so in the public, not in secret, and certainly not with the intention to deceive anybody about what the plans were for that site. Now, as it relates to the protection of trees, I think that's a fair conversation to have, whether or not there is an additional look that the commission needs to take at trees and tree protection. We have hired an urban forester. We have authorized a plan around that. And I believe that although it was mentioned sort of in a jocular manner, I do hope that people who are intense in their emotions about this and their feelings about it will engage in that process. It's an important one. It's the government legitimately reaching out and saying, share your thoughts on ordinances and on process and how we deal with this going forward. And then, the only other thing I'll say is I'm a fan of urban infill. And anyone who cares about the environment, to include trees, to include air quality, to include the quality of life of a city, I think also has to be a fan and an advocate of reducing the amount of urban sprawl, wherein you have to add more lane miles, where you put more cars on the road, where you pollute the air more and decrease the quality of life of people because of the amount of trees that come down due to that development there. The city limits are about 108 square miles compared to the county over 800 square miles. This commission has held steady on encouraging urban infill and resisted expanding the urban services area so that we wouldn't see the kind of hyper growth and hyper development that decreases the quality of life of people. But we can't have it. We can't have it all. We're either going to try to have smart growth policies that concentrate growth and development in the urban core, or we're going to have sprawl everywhere and everybody in cars and everybody on the road and building lane miles as if that's going to take us out of congestion and traffic, and it just isn't. Now, I realize that this is in some ways a deviation from the conversation around trees in and of itself, but it's absolutely related. That if we're going to grow as a city, and I believe we are, the population projections show it, that we've got to be smart around that future growth and development. And if we're going to preserve it for generations to come, that means we've got to be extremely protectionist about the only non-renewable factor in this, which is land. When it's gone, it's gone. And I certainly would prefer that we have a policy toward urban renewal, urban reuse, core urban development within the urban core, so that we can protect everything outside of it, and also try to accomplish that in a smart way that doesn't lose the integrity and the quality of what I think many of us have chosen Tallahassee for. I chose to raise my family here and live here, partly because of this community's beauty and its attraction, and I don't think that we're going to lose that so long as we keep really smart policies around how we do this. Now, will everybody agree? Absolutely not. And have we done it perfectly? Probably not. But we should be in pursuit of how we make this process better for the next project that comes through, because there will be a next project. And there are a lot of concerns to have to balance in that process. So, again, just want to thank those who came and expressed your comments. You will be probably completely unsatisfied by my thoughts, but they're my thoughts, and they also are what guide my thinking and voting when it comes to development, urban renewal, and certainly my environmental beliefs around how it is that we grow smart so that we don't decrease and diminish the quality of life for people who are going to come after us. Any other comments? Commissioner Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first of all, I want to thank every one of you that came tonight to express your thoughts. And I share the Mayor's feelings that there's really nothing that we can say to you that'll make you feel any better about any of this, or that'll even make us feel any better about it. I heard a lot of comments that we should get out more, basically. And I did want you to know that I believe all of us have been over to this. I know for sure I have been on the site itself within the past, well, I guess it was about a week and a half ago. But there are a lot of things about this that I wanted to build on some of the comments that people made. And one of the first ones was that Brian Lupiani had mentioned Myers Park. last year when we had all that discussion about Myers Park, so many people said there's no need to do development here because you're going to be doing it right across the way on the other side of the park. So given that, I mean, that was the general consensus, and that was a lot of the reason why we just basically said, no, this isn't this isn't needed. But at that point, I really would have believed that people actually knew what was going to happen on the other side of the park. So there's a certain element in my mind here of mystery that people felt that they didn't know this was going to happen. That didn't make it any easier because they were beautiful, beautiful, beautiful trees. And nobody's even mentioned the azaleas that were in bloom at the time. So I frankly couldn't have watched that. As far as the archaeological resources are concerned, we received a letter from the Archaeological Society and the two gentlemen that spoke, which has immediately went over to the CRA office. It is, in fact, the CRA, which is made up of city and county commissioners. Many of your commissioners, one of your, Commissioner Dozier, because a lot of people were from the Myers Park and Indian Head, it sounded like, is on the CRA. This is a decision that was made over a very long period of time. One of the reasons that we didn't have more than one response, we had no response the first time. Second time there was a response, but there were $2.5 million worth of public needs that had to be met on this property, and that was a very, very heavy lift for just about anybody, and not many people could have actually done that. But the point about the cultural resources, that letter did get directed over there, and apparently there's been a cultural analysis of the site, and I've asked that they contact you all, I don't know where y'all are, back and let you know.
We've read the report. It doesn't address archaeology at all.
All right, well, I can't speak to that because that's not my area of expertise, but I did do what I thought was the appropriate step to get it sent over there to make sure that that was covered. Apparently, but there is state law that says if you find any, there is state law related to this, I know, and if they find anything archaeologically significant, they're supposed to stop work, as far as I understand. So, and I know that happens. I mean, it's not, it has happened. It's not as though it never happens, so at least it happens in Tallahassee. This property did belong to FSU before it belonged to the CRA, which is the owner of the property at this point. You're right, the property hadn't changed hands, but the city is not in ownership of the property at this point. And I did want to finally say that as far as blight is concerned, let's don't forget about Cascades Park. We've got 28 acres of previously toxic waste site. Part of the need for this property in the first place was to back up the amphitheater that was built there in the park. So as part of the park, and I agree, the tree cover isn't what I hope it will be in another 10 years, but there has been a significant amount of planting that's gone on in the park. Also, we have 35 acres across the way of Myers Park. We've also, I sound like I'm making excuses here, but frankly, we need your help. We needed to hear your voices sooner than this. And you really do have an opportunity right now as far as the Urban Forest Master Plan is concerned, because it was hard to get that is a commission priority for this year. Those discussions are about to start, and we have all of your names, and you should all get personal invitations to come and participate in those talks, because that's how these decisions end up. I don't know when the last time that the environmental ordinance was revised, but I can tell you that I went there every single solitary, and I don't know what's happening over here.
That's the Tallahassee Democrat.
Nice. Would you like to speak to us? Anyway, the point is that we have worked hard to get that. We've worked hard to get an urban forester, and that person is Mindy Mormon. She's wonderful. You're going to really like her, and I do believe that it's very important for you to participate in discussions about this. And finally, I want to direct you to the next line of battle, and that is Adams Street. And before that, I want to thank Randy Denker, if she's still here, for the suggestions that she brought forward, because one of her excellent suggestions was that the website of the project be posted on the property, and I think that was an excellent idea, because this property's website was set up on the 28th of 2017. They've been sending out notices unasked for, to people. I mean, I get them every week or two, and so there has been available information out there, but the bottom line is that you're here tonight because you didn't know. So our question is, how do we fix that? How do we fix that in the future? And so I'm going to be following up with Randy to find out what those other two suggestions that she had on there. But as far as that EMO ordinance and the tree ordinances changing and all that, I basically went every week or two, went for an endless period of time to work to make sure that was revised properly. Ann Bidlingmeyer also was there. And we're not the only people at the table, though. There you'll find, when you get into discussions about tree regulation, that there's more than just us. There are a lot of other people in town who have opinions that may not coincide with the ones that we've heard here tonight. But that's why it's more important and very important that you do get out there and you do share your opinions at every opportunity to make sure people really know that we still are that arbor green plate. No, that's a wrong term, because I think that's a pesticide company. But we're a place where we really do care about trees, and we really do want in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now to be able to say we are still a green city. So please, please participate in that. Please follow any activity that happens on the Envision site, because the Governor's Walk can be beautiful, and the trees along Adams Street in the northern part of it are very, very beautiful, and I would like for those to be left alone. So let's please help with that. Thank you.
Great. If there are any other comments?
Curtis?
Good job. Commissioner Ziffer.
I am, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Ziffer, please.
Are we on sharing of ideas now?
Yes.
Okay, good. That was it.
Oh, okay.
A few words. I know everybody's ready to go, so.
Well, I want to share a quick idea. I got a little bit of hardware here that I want to mention, but before that, want to remind the commission and the community that on April, excuse me, on April 22nd, the Longest Table will return to homes and public spaces hosting these meals. I know I will host one, would encourage others who are willing and able from the city family and otherwise to also consider hosting. Now to the hardware. Last week, the City of Tallahassee Summer Jobs Program, Tallahassee Future Leaders Academy, received a national recognition from the NLC for, I want to particularly acknowledge our staff in the Office of the Mayor, and specifically our Human Resources Department, that is taking on a huge responsibility in keeping this program moving and growing. Some of you will remember we started by hiring 100 young people, principally focused on our Promise Zone area. And the first year, all 100 of those folks did government-related work. In the second year, we were able to expand that program to include 100 additional jobs that were private sector jobs, bringing that total to 200 summer jobs that are offered. And by the way, it's incentive enough to have young people to work and earn a little bit of money that they can prepare themselves for reentry back into school. But they also receive over the summer a certificate for customer service, food service, and financial management training. And these youth also visit FAMU and Florida State University and spend a day or more on those campuses. And you would be surprised how many of these young people have grown up, lived in this community all the way through high school, and have never been on the campuses of FAMU or FSU. This summer, commissioners, there are already more than 600 applications for these 200 jobs. And what I would love for the city manager to consider, obviously, is this commission to bring back an item that might have us look at 50 additional positions to bring the total number of 250. And even though this would not make way for all 600 individuals, I'm imagining that maybe those 50 positions, particularly for the human services organizations in this community who don't have the resources to create the financial stream for these folks to come in and work in those organizations. But those entities are a huge part of who we are here in the city of Tallahassee. Would love for us to see whether or not there is capacity to assist those organizations that are desirous of a summer intern with an opportunity to work. So that would be 50 additional positions that are intended for the human services organizations. And to cost that out, not asking for a vote tonight, but certainly looking for the city commission, looking for at least a co-signer to see if the city could bring back an item that would cost that for us and let us know what that might look like. And then finally, I want to acknowledge Commissioner Richardson, who I think now every year has been the speaker for, or one of the presenters from the city on graduation. And I've missed a couple, but every year without fail, you've been there and have greeted those students and provided a word. And so, in addition to obviously the city HR family and this commission being able to share in this, want to specifically call you out for what your involvement has been through the program up to this point and beyond.
My pleasure.
Of course. Other sharing of ideas, Commissioner.
One thing, and I want to thank Commissioner Ziffer for bringing this to my attention, but I think it's important because there are a lot of people in town that are really interested in Amtrak. And basically we got from Senator Nelson's office a notice that Amtrak funding was not originally included in the president's budget, and the fate of the Panhandle Amtrak route was very definitely in doubt, but funding is now in the budget. And so hopefully passenger service will be restored, if not soon, then shortly thereafter.
Yep. Absolutely.
But it's government time, so don't be holding your breath.
Government time.
Anyway, the funding's there, and I think that's very, 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 very good news that was quite unexpected.
Great. Thank you. Any additional sharing of ideas? Commissioner Ziffer.
Mr. Mayor, just to follow up on that award. That was at the National League of Cities Conference about 2 weeks ago, and I was fortunate to be part of that breakfast when our group won that, which was an extremely proud moment for certain those folks that were there to accept it. And it was, for me in particular, being able to sit there and hear the round of applause for our city for something that really truly special that came out of it. I would like to add, though, if I could, just for conversation, I know it's something that you've talked about, for those additional 50 jobs, the number one concern about every city in this country that was discussed at the conference, whether you were a large city, you were a small city, or you were medium-sized like us, has to do with workforce training. Workforce training. Training people for jobs that are available that are not being filled. And while in our community, obviously human service jobs are important, there are trades. I mean, we're talking about a several $100 million project on Cascades Park. We have a project on North Monroe Street. We have other projects that are going to require people with trade skills, and we have a problem in filling those. And so what we really need to look at, if I could suggest, is trying to set up through whomever, our construction companies, whoever, apprenticeships, internships. It's important also for young people to share moments with those individuals that have been doing this so they can see that there is potentially a way out from where they are to a better life, to a life that includes a job, that includes steady income, that includes your kids going to a good school. And so I would suggest that we look at not only perhaps human service jobs, but also look at apprenticeships in the trades, because we're going to need them out there.
Yeah, great point. In fact, like I said, we've got about 100 right now private sector folks that have come to the table to offer positions. I know we've got some development folks in the room, and otherwise I hope that from the private sector side, if there are folks particularly in this area that are interested in offering up some positions, apprenticeships there, that would absolutely be welcomed. We want to see more of that. Commissioners, if there are no other comments on the sharing of ideas, we stand in adjournment. Thank you.